Good morning, good morning, good morning, everybody. I'm home. I'm back home. I got a couple more things on the set now. Innocent until proven guilty. Upside down justice. I put it in front of my diploma. I think it's a message. And soon that Canadian flag may be upside down. It depends on how the rest of the couple weeks go. Well, folks, I am home. I had a great journey down to Lethbridge. We had some ups, we had some downs, we had some cries, we had some laughs. I met some people, lots of people, really. Yeah, it was an excellent time to share the information, expand the family, and make sure that a lot of people understood what was going on and that they're also welcome to come and hang out and see what's going on. We're going to go through the court case, the 5 days that we're down there. We'll go through each day. We've got all the players here, including Danielle, Donald, and Granny. So we're going to make sure that we cover all 5 days, highlight and lowlights as well. And we'll make sure that you know what's going on. Then you can take this particular episode and kind of recap that entire week. But it's been interesting for sure. I mean, we're not completely happy. We're also not completely disappointed. So we're, somewhere in the middle, which is right where you should be when it comes to the legal system. You should never have somebody super happy and one super upset. The best settlements are when both people are unhappy, because usually you're getting yourself right in the middle there, which is closer to the fairness line than anything else. So we're not thrilled, but we're not upset. We understand things made sense. Things were disappointing. Things were exciting. We had all of that going on. And then behind the scenes, we had a lot of going on as well. We're talking with, important government official guy. He's helping out some stuff. We are now talking to a lot more volunteers. So if you want to volunteer your time, there's a lot of people saying, hey, I can help out on clips. I can help out on this. I can help out on that. That's happening a lot more. And yeah, there's a lot more support coming out of the woodwork as well. So if you want to continue to support, go look in the ticker for the ways you can do that. I'm going to start plugging something. James Sowery. He made this, okay? You can get these as well. You get them engraved with your name. That's my son's name, just to be clear. And you got the logo on the front. Look, doesn't leak, and it keeps everything nice and warm. So you can find, it should be in the ticker somewhere, James Sowery's email address, and you can go ahead and email him to go ahead and get stuff like that ordered. What I like to do is I'm going to order a few of them and give them away for gifts. So it's a good way to support James and to also, make people look stylish. The Daily Wire guys have the liberal tumbler for the tears, liberal tears. Maybe this is trucker gas or something like that. But anyways, get yourself a tumbler out of James. It's pretty cool. And I also want to thank everybody who showed up on Friday during the Mocha interview and supported him. He had his best day of donations since he launched his entire website, which would have been a whole bunch of people supporting him at his launch. Best day since he launched, and 50 new subscribers to his newsletter. So to all of you who went and reached out to Mocha to support him for his hard work as an independent journalist, thank you very much for that. It really changed his week, really. And because of that, we're now working on a docuseries. We're going to be doing a bunch of things with Mocha. He's going to jump in his car, drive coast to coast, get interviews, and we're going to be tackling some of the really, really important subjects. He's going to be tackling cancel culture, political prisoners in Canada, and the indoctrination of children. So we're definitely sending him to Saskatchewan to go get some information around Swift Current and what they're doing over there when it comes to indoctrination. He's going to be talking to political prisoners all over Canada, a whole bunch of them in Windsor, several of them in Ontario, up Ottawa region. And we'll be doing that. And he'll go all the way to the East Coast to interview another political prisoner named Jeremy McKenzie. So between our guys and Jeremy McKenzie, there's a whole bunch of other additional political prisoners that we're going to be highlighting. Huge thanks to Viva Fry, who on Friday, I believe it was on Tim Pool, and he talked about the Coutts men for almost 8 minutes. Thank you very much, Viva, or David, actually. We're now at that point where you're David. But thank you very much, David, for taking that time, being so articulate with it, laying it all out. Even in the face of all the questions from the guys on the show, you were able to articulate it all out, and thank you very much. And you did get all the good details out. So thank you very much, David. Appreciate that. And thank you for Tim for having David on and not changing the subject. The Coutts Four are our political prisoners, much like your Jan 6. So thank you very much to Tim. Also, thank you everybody behind the scenes who are connecting us to additional media. I think Don might be able to touch on a few, and we may have some good news coming up. We're going to save tomorrow for the media day because Ray wants to come back. Ray McGinnis wants to come back. So we'll have him back tomorrow and update him and talk about some things he's also discovered since his article went out live. He's got some great news there too. So media is really working really hard for us. And then thank you to everybody on Twitter. You guys have really been sharing. I have now had to try to catch up. The messages I've been receiving, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, there's hundreds, if not thousands now. It's now turned into a bit of a function on my side to try and keep up. So I'm going to keep trying to keep up. And if I missed one of your comments or I skipped something, it's not intentional. Just understand I didn't change my opinion of you. I just simply lost you in the haystack of messages I'm receiving now. But keep them coming. It's great news. A lot of people are getting support. The numbers are looking great. Everything's working out well. We're going to keep this going. Now, on that note, I'm going to bring in Granny, who, by the way, sounded amazing. We're going to find out what she sounds like now. And hello, Danielle. We'll bring Danielle in. And good morning, Donald. We'll bring Donald in. Granny, share that with the world. What do you sound like?
Oh, I hope I don't sound robotic anymore.
Yes. We have a win. Thank you, Granny. Thank you for keep working on that. You do sound perfect. You sound like an angel.
I can never leave home now. I'm in the basement forever.
Is that where you set up? Yeah, we got the male chicken back. The rooster. It's tough, right? It's tough. It feels backwards and stuff.
It is backwards.
Yeah. But hey, it works for us. Good morning, Donald. Did you have a good week? We kind of missed you a little bit with our evening stuff, and we don't really talk to you as much as we were talking with Granny and Danielle.
Well, I had a very exciting week, but the most exciting thing about my week was on Sunday morning, I was on Mojo 50 radio out of the United Kingdom, and I spoke for an hour about the boys. And you know,
the boys and Ottawa? Did you get both of them?
I have all sorts of messages this morning, emails, invitations for other shows, all based out of Europe. And I'm going to try and get, some assistance from you folks. But the Coutts Four is now an international story, and I know we are hearing from all sorts of people all over the world. It's from Australia too. Wow, excellent.
Yeah, there's one that I won't name, but I'll hint it. It rhymes with trucker. Someone's reached out that rhymes with trucker.
Does it begin with F?
No, not this one. Maybe drop the R, and you'll get there closer. But yeah, we have some international attention now. We have some serious people who can make phone calls and bring things to people's attention. That's happening as we speak right now, Donald. So thank you for your article, because your article really kicked off that domino of credibility when it comes to the reporting.
Well, it's everything. Everything is just adding up together. But the words political prisoners, Canada's political prisoners, are now going internationally. That's what the Coutts Four are referred to, political prisoners.
That's what they are. That's a legal definition, that's a social definition, and that's the intellectual definition. They are political prisoners. And good morning, Danielle. How are you doing?
I'm not too bad. I kind of had a resty day yesterday. It was nice. Caught up at the house. Kind of nice to be home.
What I like is I can see batches of interaction on Twitter with you. So all of a sudden there's Danielle taking care of business. And boy, you're really doing a great job, by the way.
A little sporadic. We're at 5 minutes, so I don't want to lip somebody off on Twitter. Put some people straight.
Bathroom break. Let's get to the truth. Yeah, for sure. And you're actually getting really good. Well, I don't think you were bad before, so don't take it that way. You're getting good at getting the good information in there and articulating it and getting concise with it. And it's become a little bit difficult for the side to debate with you, hasn't it?
Well, I like to add proof to anything I say. So if I say something or I see somebody else say something, I've usually got a pretty big data bank that, like Donald was saying, when we're talking about kind of the database with searchable stuff, it's here, right? So
yep.
Typically I can, okay, well, there's this. So you can argue or not.
You're gonna be our bubble girl. We're gonna put you in a bubble so nothing gets to you, nothing hurts you. That head of yours. We're gonna make sure that you have a helmet on. You're gonna look odd, but we got to keep that thing secure.
Try. Eat lots of
Yeah.
fish.
So,
That's all.
all right. And then, Granny, we had a bit of a fundraiser on Saturday. You want to quickly brief about that one?
Yes, and I do want Stacy to meet you and Donald privately because she is up against Alberta Health Services still, and I do believe what she's going through was the start of everything we've gone through. So I do believe where we went on Saturday, Stacy and her family have been up against Alberta Health Services, and her story is just mind blowing. So
Wednesday,
there
want to
was
bring her on?
that. We'll
Wednesday,
talk.
Thursday. Okay.
Yeah,
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 we'll
we'll
figure it out.
talk. So we went out to Stacy. She had a small fundraiser for the guys. She was promoting them, and I honestly believe small communities is where the magic happens. You
Yes.
get small groups of people that are manageable. You can have a really good conversation. I came in, it was a little strange, as Jason can say, all of a sudden everybody's looking at you and clapping because you walk through the
Yeah, that
door.
was weird.
Yeah, that
a
was
first
weird.
for me.
Yeah, and they asked about some of the court case because we could talk one-on-one. So I talked about what I had seen and what I had heard, and then Jason came in and Jason shared a different story. You know, they were talking politics and stuff, and then I mingled around the room and talked with other people. It was a good fit, and that's how we connect. That's how we unite. It's really hard if you take 1,000 people and try and talk. But when you take 20 people, everybody's engaged. It's more work, but you get a better result. And then when all these
Absolutely.
pieces to the puzzle come together, we'll have a strong foundation. So I believe it was a really good day. And I love Stacy. I'm in her corner, and I really want. I think Donald, not you, also Jason, but I think Donald could really help her with some behind the scenes stuff. So we'll get you guys together.
Absolutely. Yeah. When you have a larger group, you talk to them. When you have a smaller group, you talk with them.
Yeah.
And that's a very different thing. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. We had some very supportive people there that really liked what we were doing. And we had actually, I think everybody liked what we were doing, but we had some people that understood that the system could be repaired. And then we had some people who thought, and we had some people who said, there's no way you guys are going to be able to fix this. So that was a good conversation to have. And that's broad strokes of the public. But the good news is from that conversation, a ball started to roll, and yeah, things are getting really big for us right now, there, guys. And Donald, how was your week? We really didn't spend much time with you last week.
Well, I had a very exciting week. Lots of things happening on the family level. All good, all good. But really, the most exciting thing for me was the number of independent media outlets reaching out to me, and some, I'll call them legacy media. We'll see how that works out. These are good people. They know the story. They want to tell the story, but they're getting a block at the editor's level. So we're going to work on that, and we'll see what happens. Very optimistic.
Yeah, and we were working with, maybe I won't name them today, Granny, but if you go back to our 1 week episode today, you'll know who I'm talking about. There's an alt media who's now coming back to talk to us again. I'll update you on that, Granny, after. But look, I identify absolutely. There's 3 types of media in Canada. There's the mainstream media, there's alt media, and then there's new media or independent media. Some of them are misusing labels because some of them are not independent. But there's definitely 3 groups of media: a mainstream, alt, and then independent. That's really starting to pick up now. So Danielle, you've been on top of this. You and I have been taking notes. Granny has been taking all the notes up here as well. She's making the smiley faces to the men to make sure that they know that we still love them, taking care of the health issues with Tony and other things like that. But yeah, you and I took a bunch of notes when it came to what happened this week. So how do you want to tackle this? I'm going to maybe throw it to you, and we can talk about Monday, where was the application for voluntariness for Chris Carver. Maybe you can kind of break that one down for us.
Yeah, we just finished an application that we had started back in June, so we did kind of tie up some of the other things. The voluntariness for Chris's statement, I think we had talked about before, was I think there was just a decision that needed to be made on that. Everything was done up until that point, and we just needed the judge's decision. But the judge ended up saying that his statement was submittable for evidence, which he had his reasonings for as for why he thought. I think we talked previously about the operating mind and the oppression. So he had deemed that the oppression wasn't a factor, that Chris had clearly made conscious, well thought out answers and things like that, even while in duress. So that's kind of where we were at with that. I've got mixed feelings about it. At Chris's statement, it really humanizes him, right? So
Yeah.
to not have it in front of a jury, I was, me and Jacqueline were talking about that. We were a little bit mixed feelings about that, because he looks like he's such a nice guy. He's very polite. He's not saying anything like you would imagine somebody who's arrested for what he's been arrested for would say or do or talk like. He doesn't seem like a criminal. He's, that kind of way. The emotions attached to what he's saying and everything was so real. And we kind of were talking about, like, well, if this is in front of a jury, say one day, like, the men walk in, they're in these boxes and they just sit there. They don't speak. They don't, a jury would never know who they were. The judge might not even know who they are without seeing
Right.
those videos of them in their real life state. Even if they were in their most stressed out state, they were all extremely polite, and the things they were saying and that way. And so I kind of think, well, gee, like, I guess if the jury was to walk in and watch that video, if it was me, I think I would have a better understanding about who Chris was and maybe who he wasn't from that video. So it not being taken out, I mean, he didn't say anything that was bad or hurt, to hurt the case or anything. So I think I'm not disappointed in a sense. I think that if the jury comes in and gets to see that video, instead of looking at Chris in the box as just a shell of a human that you can mold with your mind or whatever you've got in your head about them already. I mean, the jury's not supposed to have anything in their head about them already, but it's probably kind of hard not to. So I think that, yeah, maybe a jury seeing all of those videos, it will help them, because they're humans and they're dads and they're upset and they're begging, and not in like a criminal way, right? I think it might be a good thing. So I guess
Yeah,
the
and from
lawyers
this
got to do what they got to do. If they can think they can get something thrown out, they get it thrown out, and that's what they do. But I'm not super disappointed that that video won't be shown to the jury, get a real taste of who he is and where his heart's at the time.
Well, from this particular encounter, we might be able to get some cleanup around getting meds to people during interviews and stuff like that, because this is what the major problem was when this one was somebody required some medical attention during these interviews and didn't get it. And the question was whether or not that caused problems on the interview itself. So maybe out of this suffering that Chris had during this, we can get some sort of rules around how they're supposed to treat people who have medical conditions before they interview them. So maybe there's a silver lining here still yet to be seen there, Danielle.
Yeah, of course. Everything with this always has a bigger meaning. I mean, we talk about the four, but like Granny can attest, as we dig into this system and we see how things are done, it's not just about these four guys. There's
And the men know
other
that too.
people
They know it's
suffering
others.
through interviews and all sorts of things, and suffering in the remands. They don't have a voice at all. Like, we're their voice too. The men are their voice, right? So there's so many things going on behind the scenes that we're fighting for, that really affect anybody that's been, even if you're a criminal, you should be getting healthy food in jail. You should be getting your health taken care of. I don't think people understand how people are
Callous
treated
it is,
in
really.
there, like, it a lot of the time, well, that's fine, it's not meant to be comfortable. We've heard that
Yeah, I've heard that comment
thrown
one too
around a
many
lot. Well, it's
times.
not meant to be comfortable. Well, we're not asking you for a pillow. We're asking you for non-rotten food and medicine. And if Tony can't poop, that's a pretty big deal, and he's not the only one. So this is never, like, I mean, yeah, it started out being about these four guys, but it isn't about them. It's not just about them. There's other innocent people in the remand center, innocent or not, that are not getting treated fairly. The cleanliness of the remand centers, the way they're treated, all of it. I don't care if you're a criminal or not. I don't care if you did something wrong. There's basic human decency. That's what we're talking about. Basic food and health issues. So that's got to change. I do believe I seen a quote or a meme somewhere like that. A country can only be held up to its highest standard if you look into its jail system. And I can't remember the exact way that was worded, but yeah, if you look into Canada's jail system and then you flash forward to our fun little lives out here, it's not okay, right? It is a third world country in there, and that's not okay. It's not a rehabilitation center. They make it sound like you're in there to get better. No, it's meant to break them. It's meant to make them worse. Not one soul has walked out of there rehabilitated in any way. I would probably put money on that statement. It's
and
creating criminals, and it's if these guys weren't who they were and they're all of a sudden exposed to what they're exposed to, who's to say they don't come out worse people? And that's our worst nightmare. We don't want our 4 guys to come out. They're obviously going to be different, but they don't need to be less than what they were. And even if they had done something wrong, they never should be coming out of there in worse shape than when they went in, I believe. Mentally,
100% you're not.
physically, all of it. They should be rehabilitating them with good food, proper health. In the remand centers, they don't have like education programs or none of that. Like we talk about, it's the armpit of the system. It's the waiting room at the hospital. It's not set up for them to be okay, right? And most people, actually, I think it's like the average is between a month and 2 months in remand. That's normal, right? That's the normal amount
Or
of
even
time
less.
in Canada. There's statistics on the internet. 2 months is pretty much like where it kind of maxes out a lot of the time in these remand centers. They're not meant to be lived in. So maybe somebody can put up with a bit of crappy conditions for a month or two, but not to live,
Right.
forever, possibly feeling like.
And what else we also learned was the conditions are not the same across all of them. So Lethbridge Correctional Center is actually one of the better ones, according to the men. On my way back to meet up with Grandma on Saturday, all 3 men called me, and I had them on my phone in my car, so my wife got to hear some of this. And Jerry was actually in high spirits. He was very happy about being in Lethbridge because they put cheese on his ham sandwich there. So that was an upgrade for him. He was happy about that. And then, Granny, you had to deal with some probiotic issues throughout the week. We'll jump into that because that was part of the week, but let's go ahead and let people know about the health conditions you have to deal with.
Well, like Tony has SIBO, that is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And he had it back in 2016. And back then he thought he was going to die. He was so sick. You need good food, and you got to take certain foods out. You have to have clean water. You really have to watch what you do with your body, and be stress-free. So what he's going through, you think about it, he was in a gang ward up in Calgary, and he was already becoming sick. Like, he's been sick for a while. Now he's stressed out. They won't give him his probiotics that he does have a prescription for from Medicine Hat. They will not give it to him. His friend Nikki is like a dog chasing her tail right now. They keep saying, "Oh no, that's got to be the remand. Oh, it's got to be Alberta Health Services. Oh, but in real time, Tony's sick, and he's getting sicker, and nobody seems to want to help him. Where's our humanity? Like, what is wrong with people? He's innocent until proven guilty. He even said that to a nurse when a nurse was mad at me for trying to help him. He looked at her and he says, "I'm innocent until proven guilty, and I deserve health care." But nobody wants to help him. It's like he doesn't matter. And obviously he's not the only one. I've been asking the guys other stuff. They've got their issues. But how do we help them? They're behind a locked door and nobody wants to listen. Let me back up. There are people that care, that are in that system, that do see them. But they can only help so far. They can make them comfortable, but they can't go out and get probiotics for them. So we're on it. If anybody does know anybody that they could contact and help, Nikki did reach out to Danielle Smith's office. She spoke with an assistant there. The assistant blatantly told Nikki she was a liar and that she was not credible. Well, Nikki got a little upset and spoke about Tony's conditions, and it doesn't seem to matter. And Chris Carbert said the worst part of the entire remand system, which there's a lot of the system is bad. He said Alberta Health Services was the worst part of it. And I'm going, this is Alberta, Canada. So we do need to help people, and not just our 4-man. Yes, our 4-man, but we need to help others also. And that is the light that's being put on this. And I know there's a lot of love out there for these 4 men, and we will find them help. But Tony is struggling in real time. So we need to help him now.
Absolutely, Granny. And I feel that big time now, especially after learning the stories and what's going on with them, and then hearing about all these other political prisoners across Canada, in jail, out of jail, being charged, convicted, confessed. All of this stuff is happening right now. And these aren't the guilty people. Daniela, did you put your hand up there?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, and so I know, like, when we were dealing with that stuff with Tony's health issues, we dealt with that back in June. So I think I talked about it, like how we, like, behind the scenes, we're trying to make sure he doesn't get fed another sandwich because he can't. He's already sick. And we went through it again this week where, okay, Tony's getting, ham sandwiches all day again. And you could tell by the end of the week, like, he's back, he's looking gaunt, his eyes are bloodshot, he's hunched
He had his
over.
knees up to his chest.
And like you can really see it on him, and it's hard to sit there and watch him kind of go downhill all week. And while we're, people are fighting to get him feeling better, and it just goes downhill because they keep giving him sandwiches. And we've had to do this before. Like, don't you have a memo somewhere? Like, come on. And I know, like, before when we talked to, the lawyer and stuff about that and what they could do, she says, well, we can call the remand and kind of just let them know that lawyers are involved, but like they can't do anything. They're defense lawyers. We were told that if we want to fight this, we have to basically sue the remand center ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't do that until after their trial because it would take precedence over their trial. So we're looking, okay, trials May, June. So, okay, well, we can't even start holding them accountable.
Who gave you that advice
until
about
next
precedence?
year.
Who gave you that advice
We're
about
talking
precedence?
2 years. Like Granny said, this is real time. Watching him fade from Monday to Friday, 100% different person. Anybody could see it. So, and then being like, I mean, it's not the defense lawyer's fault. Like, that's just the way the system's set up. We want to do something. We've got to wait a year to even put one foot in front of the other to get some accountability for this. So,
yeah, where'd you get that information from? Because that's not correct. Where'd you get that information that you have to wait till the end of trial? That you have to wait till the end of
That's
trial.
what his lawyers told me. That's what his lawyers told me. If we wanted to start a lawsuit against the remand center, that we would have to wait until after trial because it would take precedence. That's what she said. 100% what they told me. Multiple lawyers.
Maybe if they're doing it, but we can look into other things. Okay?
Well, they can't do it. They're defense lawyers.
That's exactly
right. You would have to hire a prosecutor, and clearly said you can't do that until after. If he's involved, it would take precedence over our case.
Right, but that's what I'm saying, Danielle. We're not talking about using those lawyers. So we'll talk about this offline. Okay. So Donald, I'm going to go to you because you've had something here. We have a comment about how do you win justice in a corrupt system, and you wanted to take that one on.
Well, how do you win justice in a corrupt system? I've been asking that question for 45 years. And I see something that really has me concerned with the Coutts Four. Now, you've read my article maybe, and you know it's political, and everything's political. The investigation, the handling of the evidence, denying bail, it's all political. But when I see what we have in the Coutts Four with the prosecution dropping thousands and thousands of pages of evidence hours before the trial was supposed to commence in June. Well, you know what? That was a plan. That was no accident. After a
Strategy.
year and a half, there can be no doubt that this withholding, deliberately withholding of evidence from the defense was malicious, it was unethical, it was strategic, it's perhaps even illegal when you talk about obstruction of justice and such. There is no way, after a year and a half, that they didn't know they had thousands of pages of documents. And then, after those were looked at, lo and behold, there's other documents that they're still withholding. And, you know, we know that there were even documents that were accidentally disclosed. They were going to keep, the Crown and the police were going to keep those documents secret.
Mhm.
And they were accidentally disclosed. And perhaps that's some of what's happening with that sealed envelope and such.
There's still missing information because we're still going through an application for disclosure right now as well. So there's a dump, another dump, and they're still fighting for more documents that they know about.
Exactly. But in context, this is a year and a half after the arrests. These men have been in prison for a year and a half. And the trial was supposed to start on what, June 14th, something like that?
The 12th of June.
12th of June. And hours before it started, they dumped thousands of pages. That's deliberate. That's malicious. It just shows that this thing has a political life. It's being directed by the government. You can't tell me it's not. You just can't tell me it's not. With that kind of malicious misconduct. And what's there to do now? They have to take a few months and go through the documents, find out what's happening. There's probably other documents that are missing. This is after a year and a half. After they used what they did to these men to shut down the country, to declare the Emergencies Act, to seize bank accounts and put people in jail and ruin lives and jobs and businesses. And now, a year and a half later, they dump thousands of pages like, oh, here you go. I hate this corruption. I hate this corruption. That was strategic. I just hate it. All I can do is tell you about it.
Absolutely. And what we know, Don, is like 4 months ago, the Rouleau report came out, which concluded that the government did nothing wrong. So they had the evidence to defend themselves, but not the evidence for the men themselves. And to the people on Twitter who keep making these comments, oh, the evidence will come out in trial. No, the evidence is supposed to come out before trial. It's supposed to be in disclosure. We're not supposed to find out the Crown's evidence in trial. We're supposed to find out the Crown's evidence before trial. The trial is on the evidence. People are getting this all mixed up, and they're making idiotic comments online. Don't worry, we'll see the evidence, or they have evidence. No, they don't have evidence. We're asking for it, and it's not coming out. And this is happening across the country. Applications for disclosure are happening across the country for these people because, frankly, there is no evidence. So now you have to try and fight the government for it. You're going to take time. You're going to take money. You're going to take resources in pre-trial to try even get to trial. And I believe this is a waiting game here, Don, that they're trying to get rid of the funds of these people, make them poor, and then they just take a deal. Because some people have done exactly that when they really shouldn't have.
But we know they've offered a deal. We know they've offered a deal.
Yeah.
And they've offered a deal.
Well, they asked for a deal. Let's be clear about that. They asked for the deal. They said, what do you want? Yeah.
I see. Oh, well, same thing. Okay. Same thing. Really.
Same ballpark. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Same thing. Okay. If they had a really solid case after holding these guys for a year and a half, if they had no doubt about it. Well, first of all, you'd already have the evidence. There wouldn't be 3,000 pages dumped on you as a strategic maneuver. And you'd already have the evidence. But if they had that, there'd be no deals. They would want to have these guys strung up in public. But really, they kind of wish these guys would just go away. And so they'll start. They'll
Yeah, and
start
they
with the
would wish we
deal.
would stop talking too. They wish we would stop talking.
Well, isn't that the truth?
Yeah, well, the truth has to get out. We're going to spread that thing like crazy. All right, so that's kind of the summary of what Donald's been up, his concerns about stuff, the health about the men with Granny, and we did day 1 of the court. So now we're going to go into day 2 there, Danielle. So day 2 was July 25th, and the Crown started this off with requesting a publication ban or trying to enforce a publication ban. And we found out they didn't follow procedure properly. They made some mistakes, which delayed the publication ban's effectiveness. It can't be put into effect unless they did. Mainly, they have to post it in the public space, and they had to make sure that the entire defense team got a copy of it all. And I guess they went ahead and did that day, but it also meant the publication ban was not in effect for 2 days. And I think this is important, Danielle, because there was a bit of a 2-day delay by the Crown in this procedure, which then took the meat and potatoes underneath the publication ban on Thursday. So I'm thinking strategy here, Danielle. When they realized they messed up, didn't get the publication ban, they then went into delay tactics for 2 days until we can get under the publication ban and then continue those arguments. What do you think about that, Danielle? Do you think that was intentional or just a lucky mistake on their part?
Oh, it's all intentional. There's no way it can't be at this point. Like you talk about like that 3,000 pages getting dumped just before in June there. 3 times in court it has happened right in front of the judge where information at the last minute, whether it's a video or this or something else, is dumped
Scribe
in
notes.
court. So then what happens is they're like, oh, we've got this extra video, or oh, look, we just found this affidavit that, we had 3 weeks to prepare and have, and they give it to them at the wrong moment. They give it to them when they have the defense team. You got to think there isn't just one lawyer working for these guys. Tony's got 2 up there with him, and the rest have a 1 each. So we're talking 5 lawyers sitting up at that table that have to go through all of this and decide what they're going to do with it, decide if a witness needs to be called, right? They can't just throw it into evidence. They could, but that'd be a bad lawyer doing that, right? Oh, you got an affidavit up? Well, do we want to wait till tomorrow and take all night looking at that? Yeah, throw it in there. And it wasn't accepted. This affidavit wasn't accepted by the judge in the end. He considered it to be an opinion, and it wasn't accepted. But we wasted the rest of that day, a bunch of the next day, because the defense has to look at it and they have to decide if they're going to contest it being put into the books or not for the court for the case. So I mean, it's frustrating. You could hear everybody in the courtroom every time they'd say something about adjourned, we have to do, and you can't even get mad at the defense. I'd be more mad at them if they're like, yeah, just throw that in there and hope for the best. They can't. And it happened in June too. They had a video dumped on them for one of the witness statements. And I think we were out for like a day almost. Like it was a long time. And that's dead court time. Dead. Everybody's sitting in hotels. All our supporters are hanging around. People have driven from Grand Prairie to come and sit for 2 hours, and then all of a sudden this is dumped on them and adjourned. So that kind of throughout this week too, I could kind of see it coming when it was coming. As soon as something would pop up where the Crown had, sweezeled something in there, I'm like, we're going to be out of here early. Like.
Yeah.
It's
And you were dead right about all of those, by the way.
Pardon?
I said you were dead right about all of those. Like you said, no, this is going to be an adjournment. Yeah, we're going to be coming back. I'm like, no, come on, we have time. Boom.
We're
The
going to be
judge
here all day. Yeah.
the judge basically said, listen to Danielle. Let me know what she says, because you were right about how this is
I wish.
unfolding.
Let's go. No, but I think just sitting through it for 3 weeks, like previously as well, you can see the foreshadowing coming just from having gone through it before, and that kind of way. And even the sheriff, we were having a joke, and Jason said at one point, "Oh, hey sheriff, do you think we'll be back? We'll be here till about 4:30 or 5?" And I said, he says, "Oh, I don't know." And I says, "I bet you they're coming back out there and they're adjourning till the morning because they just had something dumped on them." And the sheriff went like that. And sure enough, they come back out and adjourned, and me and him.
Yeah,
we got
exactly.
that one. She's like, "What?" I'm like, "But this is why it's taking so long." I've in my notes from June, I did try to write all the dates as fast as I could, but they listed every date that something was dumped on them since this happened. Like you would assume that like by, a couple months after the case, they've at least give them a giant package and here's what we got, and then do it again. Maybe
There
once
isn't a
again,
giant
with
package.
new stuff, you'd think. But it was something like 15 times through the course of this. So this stuff we're talking about happening right before court, during court, that's not even the half of it. That's not even a smidgen of what's been going on with these guys.
Right.
So you got to think when, other than Jerry with his lawyer, everybody's had to fire and rehire or had a lawyer quit. So disclosure kind of gets dumped around those periods. It's almost like there's somebody sitting there like, oh, that guy's quit. Now we're going to boom. So then you're trying to hire a lawyer, a defense lawyer, to take on this case, which is not easy, son. They won't answer your calls. They don't want it. And you're trying to feel them out, right? And then now they're looking at it going, we already have like 4 binders full of disclosure and now there's another pile. Like, how could I possibly get caught up so that, we're ready for June or we're ready for this date? It makes it impossible for them. Tony's lawyer too, like she got hired on in November and it was like, she's looking at it. She thought we had trial in June and they just kept dumping and dumping and dumping. She's like, we can't, like, luckily she's got a big firm and she can kind of
Right.
like dump some of that on someone else. But these other lawyers are working by themselves. So for them to try to go through even just one video or one smidgen of something and try to figure out what to do with it, it's eating up all their time. So we get a lot of comments from people like, well, why don't you go for another bail review, or you get
Right.
a bail hearing every 10 days,
Yeah.
or you get to do bail. Why not bail? Do you know how
It doesn't work
hard it
that
is
way.
for these lawyers to fit in a bail hearing or a bail review in and amongst like getting literally piled with stuff for this case on the side? It's you don't just like, okay, I'm going to fill out this form and go and ask for a bail review. It doesn't work that way.
It doesn't work that
They
way.
have
No.
to make a bail, there's a lot of work. So what is it, guys? Like, we go and try to go for a bail review, or do we try to kind of keep going with this application we're working on right now? What is it? So it's set up like, yes, that sounds like a great plan, but if the defense wasn't getting buried constantly, they would have time to work on bail reviews and make a case for that and do things properly, because that costs money. It costs a lot of money to make an application. So I
It's like
know, why
25,000 for
don't you do
bail.
this and why don't you make that? Like, but that's money. Like, we just had 2 of these guys go for bail reviews. It was bad timing for them. But they were really hopeful, and they were, they didn't get denied like you say, but they got turned around at the very end point of that application to get told, oh, this isn't where this goes. This goes to the original. So for nothing. Money gone, time gone, weeks and weeks spent getting that bail review package ready, and it didn't get looked at. So, I mean, it is easy to say that, but I mean, that's like you're in the middle of your full-time job during the day and somebody says, oh, go do that job now. They can't. They're just, and it's set up for that. I really believe that. I think with them getting their preliminary inquiry kind of waived last year, a lot of this would have been dealt with then. A lot of this stuff would have been dealt with and gone maybe a year ago, and we wouldn't be in this position right now. But it is literally why we're here not doing a trial, is because of the disclosure dumps. And the disclosure dumps are sometimes, it's not a lot of content. Like we heard the judge say when he did his publication ban, he did some paragraphs on 5 and 6. And then moving forward, he says, well, this is all just a repetition of that. And this is all like, so the rest of them, 7, 8, 9, and 10, disclosure dumps of ITOs that were repetitious of the other ones, to the point where he didn't even make a point on them. Says they're already covered.
Yeah, we gotta move on here, Danielle. We
Yeah.
got to get 3 more days done here. And I don't think you can hear me. I'm trying to talk to you. I don't think you can hear me. We also heard the term coming out at this day on unlawful advice. We heard the term crime fraud come out. And this is one of the first times that I actually connected with a judge in a positive way, because he mentioned the Crown should not be hiding behind the bad acts. So when it comes to the publication ban and stuff, he actually made a comment that they shouldn't be trying to hide behind it. Like if there's some bad information there, it should be coming out. So this is kind of the first day where I was getting connected with a judge and feeling like, yeah, maybe he is impartial and he is in the middle there. So that's kind of good news. And there's also when we started hearing terms. Now, keep in mind, this publication ban that came in on Thursday isn't retroactive. So the stuff that came up before the publication ban, we're good on. And these notes are on this day. And this is where we first heard from the defense the actions that they have a problem with. Again, we don't know the content of that envelope, but this is where the defense said that the police were doing actions, got some advice, and they're arguing whether it's legal advice or not. There's an argument around that. And then the police started to do something different. So this is when we started to hear that this envelope contained information that really changed the actions of the police. What those actions are and what they did, we don't know, but we just know it changed their actions. So we're very curious what's in this envelope to do that, and we didn't get that information on this day. And then the judge was making a comment about misleading of justice and miscarriage of justice, and that's what we could be looking at on this one. And that's basically the end of that day. There wasn't much else going on. So they're basically arguing about the publication ban, and they started to get into the arguments about client solicitor privilege. So Granny, was there anything else from the first 2 days that you wanted to tack on here before I jump into the third?
It was frustrating. I won't lie. Like I said, we're all sitting there. You want something to happen, and you feel like honestly, I felt like I was watching a snail crawl backwards. It was painful.
Yeah.
You're sitting there and you just want something to happen because the guys are sitting there listening and they just want to hear something. And then the crown comes in again, and you're thinking, can anybody just hold the crown accountable? Have some consequences. Like, honestly, pulling this crap, find them personally. Like, if you're going to pull this, they need to have consequences. 15 times? Like, enough. And I honestly believe, and okay, with this going off on another topic, I believe they're trying to get to the Jordan Act. I believe
think so
they
too,
don't want to
Granny,
go to
after
trial.
this week.
Mhm.
I don't think they have the evidence for trial. This is the second option. If they don't get them to break and take a deal, the second option is to run the clock, and then CBC will clean up by saying they just got off. I believe that is the strategy at this point. It's what it looks like.
Well, if it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, it's a duck. Like,
Yes,
like, I'm
let's have some
sorry.
duck soup here because that is a duck for sure. And let's go eat that duck.
Mhm.
But I think you're right, Granny. I think if they don't break, which I really strongly believe in my heart they won't. These gentlemen have spoken to them enough. I don't think they're breakable. They know where they stand. They know where their hearts are.
Well,
So I
they
think
said they're
good.
not guilty. They've made it this
Exactly.
far. They're not going to stop. But that doesn't mean it's easy.
No,
Every
that means we're like halfway through before the Jordan Act. Like we're at the halfway point now.
Yeah.
It means they got to basically do another year, just over a
Insanity.
year to get to Jordan Act. 100%,
Insanity.
100%. And then Danielle, you kind of dropped off there, but was there anything else on the first 2 days that we didn't cover that you want to throw in there? Other than the first 2 days had accredited media, the rest of the days did not. That was really the only other thing that happened the first 2 days.
Not that I can think of off the top of my head. Like it was drawn out. That's about it. It was, not off the top of my head. The days are all kind of blurred together. I've got the first one down because it was a little different, and the second one down, but the days in between, it was,
I got my notes here. I'll take us through
which
it
day
quick.
happened on what, that it's a little blurry already.
So day 3 started off with us recognizing no accredited media there. So I approached the court for that one. This is where I reached out to, I think it was Chris Lice or Carbert's lawyer. Christine, is her name? Or Catherine. Yeah, I reached out to Catherine and I said, hey, look, I'm media. There's nobody here. Can we talk about this? And maybe I can be... no, actually, this was the court clerk I was talking to. Yes, the court clerk came over and said, hey, you guys, make sure your phones are off. Are there any questions? And I said, yes, there is. I have one. Can I become accredited media? Because there are none. She said, no. I said, well, hold on. Thanks to Donald Best, I actually know the Alberta rules around this. And the judge actually can allow anybody that the judge chooses to go ahead and do anything in that court, including act as accredited media. He doesn't accreditate you. He just allows you to do whatever you want if you ask him. So I went ahead, pushed a little back on the clerk. She went in the back room. She came back and confirmed that the judge says no. He will not be allowing me or anybody else to act as media. So we got shut down on that part of it at the beginning. And then we really just got a lot of arguments. Oh, yeah, Danielle, the one thing on the day 2 that we forgot was that surprise affidavit. So that surprise affidavit came. Okay. And that surprise affidavit was something that needed to be reviewed. And the defense wanted to look at that. So that was the first thing we talked about on day 3 was that surprise affidavit. And quickly going through it, that affidavit was thrown out because it didn't carry a lot of weight, didn't carry a lot of credibility and authentication because the person there wasn't there to speak to it. And it didn't contain the information that the judge would have wanted anyways, which was, what is this type of advice? And it called it advisory opinion instead of legal opinion. And because they called it advisory opinion in that affidavit, the judge says this has 0 value. So they tossed it out. Danielle, that particular thing, was that a time delay? Because that caused like a half a day delay just to argue a moot affidavit.
Yeah, that was what was going on, I believe, when we were having that chat with the sheriff about, we're not coming back in today. I highly doubt it. The defense team has to go out and take a peek. They'd never seen it before, and they were annoyed. They said, even one of them said, like, you've had until the end of June, like you've had weeks to do this and submit this, and now it's literally getting put in front of the judge. So again, it was just another one of those dumps at the wrong time. They could have had that person make that affidavit 2 weeks ago and submitted it to the court so that the defense had time in their offices while they're at work to go through all the things they needed to go through. They didn't know if this affidavit looked legit. They want to call that witness. They're going to want to call a witness. That could have happened. They could have called that person to come and witness the next day. We could have been adjourned till 2:00 in the afternoon when that person was available. They cannot move on. They can't move on from there. This is where they're at in court. This got dumped on them. There's nothing left to be said. If this affidavit gets submitted to the court system, this is now an actual affidavit that we have to acknowledge when they're making statements, when they're cross-examining people, when they're, arguing their final arguments. They have to take all of that into account. Is this part of our case or is it not part of our case? And if that's not dealt with first, they cannot move on. The defense said it multiple times. When this happens, I cannot move on. All of my arguments are based on this not being here. I have prepared an argument around the understanding that this doesn't exist. It hasn't existed. So
that actually happened the next day too. So we actually
changes.
had this twice.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
And I think we forgot to mention the fun part on Tuesday is that the courtroom was packed to capacity. You did not get up to go pee. It almost happened to me once. We had a bit of a break and there was one spot left and I got it. Thank goodness. But that's how we were. It was packed. And those boys come in that room when they first came in. And like we said, everybody just started clapping and cheering and calling their names. And the looks on their faces, you guys, like they're used to walking in and seeing, me and Granny and a couple other supporters. We're, hi guys. And we're doing this quiet little like, hi. Well, they walk in and the whole room just explodes like, wow! And and the looks on their faces, they were so excited to see that it was amazing. And then, yes, the judge could hear all that from his chambers and came out and we got a tongue lashing. But you know what? I said to people after, it's kind of worth it because we got in a little bit of trouble, but that moment in time, Granny's smiling and like, for us, it was worth getting in trouble over because, it's not something we continue to do. Obviously, everybody was very respectful with the judge after, and a lot of these people haven't been in court to know that this is a little bit, we've got to be very careful about what's done in court.
There's no problem.
He says no hand gestures and all of that. So everyone's like, is this a hand gesture? Like, what do we, so a little bit more cautious after that. But those guys know you're there, you guys. Like, that was amazing. That really, that changed them. So it was worth it. Sorry, Judge, but it was worth
absolutely. And what also happened that day was that was the day that there was a small group around us that said, "Hey, can we pray? Are we allowed to pray for the men?" And they were going to do a small little prayer, a little quiet one. But I'm like, no, hold on a second. So I turned to the sheriff and I said, "Hey, do we have time to do a prayer?" And he looked at his watch and he gives me this nod. He says, "Yeah, go for it." So I stood up and I said, "Hey guys, we can do a prayer." So everybody except for one accredited media stood up, and yeah, we had the Lord's Prayer there. So we set the tone that this was a supportive, unified group, and we weren't ashamed to show our pride and even our faith in what was happening there. And then I think that maybe got us all excited when the men finally came out, because I'm sure they heard it. They can hear that in the other room. And I think that went really well. And also I just want to highlight, Danielle, you're not wrong. There's a lot of people who say it needs to be somber, it needs to be quiet and all that kind of stuff. Listen, I've been through a lot of court cases. That's the type of noise that isn't a problem. It's when people are yelling at the judge, swearing and all that kind of stuff, then it certainly is a problem. Being chastised by the judge, a little slap on the hand, that's not really trouble. He's just keeping the rules and letting us know what's going on, because there's no consequences. And nor was there any consequences. Nobody got tossed out. Unfortunately, the men were penalized through someone else who originally offered me an opinion article column in their newsletter, and then they withdrew it. They withdrew that offer because we didn't have a problem, or I personally didn't have a problem with the "I love yous." So they said, because of that, we don't think you're credible. We're going to pull your article. So that only hurts the men. So there's some weird people out there that have some opinions like that, which are odd. So if you're watching, shame on you. You shouldn't penalize the men, from my opinion. We would happily put that article in. Anyways, there's some weird stuff that happens around that. So that was really the end of day 2. I think there was tons of support, standing room only. Like, hallway had a bunch of people that couldn't get in. They stayed in the hallway and stayed to support the men. So we had a great showing that day. Thank you, Danielle. I forgot about that part. But then on Wednesday, oh yeah, also Danielle, you're right. So Tuesday, that's when we came back from lunch, and at 2:05, that's when the affidavit was given to the defense, and we found out the next day that affidavit was created during lunch that day. So this isn't something they could have presented earlier, because they just created it on the spot, because I believe they wanted a delay. So that we were adjourned at 2:10 when the defense says, "Look, we just got this and we have to argue this. We have to do our arguments." So Danielle, that's when we actually had a half day on Tuesday, correct? And that was the day where the court was full. So do you think that was also maybe part of the strategy of the Crown, to empty the court of the supporters early and add at least a half-day delay with that moot affidavit? I'm sorry I keep bringing up that it's a moot affidavit, but it was created during that lunch, gave to the defense at 2:05. We adjourned at 2:10, and we had to come back the next morning to finish up on that.
Well, if it happened at lunch that day, I'm not so sure that the person making the affidavit had a full picture. How did you catch them up and get that so fast?
Well, the affidavit just said that his opinion was it was client solicitor privilege. That's all that affidavit said.
I'm not sure about like the full courtroom, that being a factor. We've just seen that happen so many times. I don't know if it would have mattered if there was 2 people in there or not. They're really just trying to stump the defense, maybe. But we packed the courtroom every day, so that didn't work.
Nope. Yeah, we did a good job all week.
Yeah, that didn't work. No, I guess we've just seen it so many times that I believe it's just a common practice that the Crown is using right now to delay. So
Yep. And so my notes say at 12:30 it was adjourned till 2 o'clock. That was lunch. Then we came back, because the whole morning was good arguments about the privilege. So the whole morning was decent arguments. So they were advancing that issue. And I think that's why the Crown did this lunch hour affidavit, because the morning arguments were not good for him at all. And what he was trying to do was have someone else establish that it is privilege and maybe shut down the conversation with that affidavit. I don't think he actually thought it would work. I do think it was a tactic. Then at 2:29, it looks like we adjourned for the day and came back the next day. So that was not much. So the morning was the beginning of the arguments for the affidavit, not the affidavit, the application for the CC1 to pierce the veil. Lots of conversation about what piercing the veil means, and then some unrelated case law, but kind of related case law. This is kind of when we started to find out that there isn't case law about this particular issue, Danielle, because none of it was coming out. We were getting civil case law, we were getting loosely connected criminal case law, but nothing that handled crime fraud, Crown, and during pretrial. Like there was no case law around that. So this is the first time we're starting to get hints at this is big because this never happened in Canada before, where the client solicitor privilege is being asked to be pierced from the Crown's office because they accidentally gave it up. So that was interesting. And then just go to my notes for the next day. Yeah, this is when we got Steve Johnson at the end of the day. So Thursday now. I believe on Thursday. Yeah. Crown continued the arguments. We were going back and forth on the affidavit, not the affidavit, the application for just piercing the veil. And at this point, we heard the DOJ come up. So Danielle, do you remember on Thursday we heard about the Department of Justice being mentioned?
Yeah, and they had been mentioned in June as well that the Department of Justice might have to be involved in.
Sorry, this is
making some of
Wednesday,
these
not Thursday.
decisions.
My bad. This
Yeah,
is Wednesday.
Yeah, and I'm not sure what the context was of that comment, but I do know in the past it was brought up that this might have to go up a little higher up to determine that client solicitor privilege.
So if you remember, they left the court and had that conversation and then came back and we're all like, oh, what's going on here? And that's when the defense returned from that private conversation and said, we have a new issue and we're now working with the Crown and the DOJ on it. And there was some hush-hush around that part. Remember that?
Yeah. And that's
So that
really
was the
all they
context of the DOJ.
mentioned. Yeah.
Yeah, and the Crown says we need to speak with Mr. Johnston. We might be able to resolve this in an hour or two. And then they brought him in on the video, made sure that he was going to be available for Thursday if needed, made sure that the witness that they're trying to line up would be available if needed. So on Thursday or on Wednesday, there was that little surprise meeting. That was a big deal on that day. And then that's also when the defense brief came up. So remember the defense brief had some privileged information or potentially privileged information. And there was that whole thing about deleting it from the judge. They would have to resubmit the brief. And then that's how we ended up on Wednesday. You remember that part?
Yep.
Okay. Did I miss anything for Wednesday? Because there really wasn't much other than they continued the arguments, had that secret meeting, and then had the big kerfuffle around the defense brief.
Yeah, that's about it, I think.
Yeah, and I think this is what's leading into my assumption here or my analysis that they were causing delays because Tuesday and Wednesday, we really didn't advance the arguments much because then on Thursday is when we get into the publication ban being put on actively. And this is why my notes are very sparse for Thursday. But we started Thursday with the argument of the brief. And this is really frustrating because we lost an entire morning here, Danielle, if you remember. The defense was ready to argue because they had prepared their argument on the defense brief, which was brought up the previous day by the meeting they had. And Tony, the lawyer for Tony, was ready to argue why this privileged information should stay there. And then the first thing the Crown did is they stood up and said, oh, we've changed our mind. This is not privileged information. We're just going to leave it at that. And then the judge says, well, what about the RCMP? Did they call it privilege? Like, we don't call it privilege. And they kind of left it at that. And then that's when Tony said up, well, that changed the entire context. I was ready to argue this being privileged. Now you're saying it's no longer privilege. I got to change my arguments. Can I adjourn till 2? So we lost the entire morning on Thursday over that. Remember?
Yep.
Yep. That was a quick.
Oops. Yeah, that's exactly what I mean. That's what we went through for 3 weeks in June. Exactly that. Lots of days where you were in court for 1 or 2 hours, everything's going along fine, and boom, you're out. Happens just like that. And that's when people wonder how this has gotten dragged out. This is how. Yep. Exactly those reasons. Strategic timing of all of it. Yeah. Very frustrating. You could definitely tell that the defense was very, very, very frustrated. When that affidavit got dropped, there were, this is unfair. This is, at some point, this has to stop, Judge, like dumping. Mm-hmm. So I think everybody was kind of hoping that maybe when we came back in on that one day and even on Wednesday with this going on, like at some point, is the judge going to say enough is enough? Stop. stop doing this. But
Yeah,
again, he's got to follow procedure. So he's actually telling them that they don't have the right, that the Crown Council doesn't have the right to make submissions or do all of this. So it's a very fine balancing act that he's going through, because he's either stuck between telling the Crown that they can't follow procedure, or he's stuck telling the defense, well, you've got to put up with the procedure. I mean, people were frustrated. And I've said it before, I'm really glad that there was a court full of people to see that. Courtroom full. It wasn't just us sitting in there witnessing it. And we've got you now, like, we've got Granny's show too. But when we went through that in June, we'd go through it all frustrated all day. There was maybe only a handful of us in the courtroom, and we come out and there's nobody there, and we don't have anybody to tell. And now it's like, it feels a lot different now. We've got a bit of a platform. We've got a full courtroom. So despite it happening, I still feel like we're winning, because we're taking the steps towards that awareness, and it's going to make it harder for anybody to get away with anything with everybody watching right now. So thanks, you guys. Keep watching.
absolutely. You're doing a great job, everybody. And Wednesday is when I did get permission to live tweet from the hallway during breaks. So Wednesday is when I started to do that. But Thursday after lunch is when we had another thing happen. So at first, nobody came back to the court. It was hush hush. And then we heard about a table outside with envelopes on it. Hush hush. I went out to go see what was going on. I was told to go back in. Hush hush. And then we kind of started to get the hint that, oh, they're going to take our phones away. And then the judge came out and let us know exactly what was going on after lunch. He called it a security breach. He said that somebody did things in the court that they shouldn't have done. And because of that, everybody's phones will be not confiscated. I want to be clear about that, because a lot of people were on Twitter even saying, did they tackle Jay and pull the phone out of his hands and stuff like that? I'm like, no, none of that happened. We were given the option to put it back into our car or leave it in an envelope. I got dropped off there, so I didn't have a car, so I put mine in an envelope. I didn't have to, but I did have to take it away. I did have to hand it in if I wanted to go into the courtroom. So it definitely became a inconvenience, because I was unable to continue live tweeting until the end of the day on Thursday. And then that was another big event there, Danielle. Now, I've looked into this particular... Yeah, I've looked into this security breach, and I'm actually confused by it, because what I understand from talking to some people who felt like they may have been part of that, they were bringing in glasses that had a camera in, but they weren't activated and they weren't on, and they didn't make it past security. Those glasses went back to the car, and the person came in no problem. There was no actual breach that happened. So I'm curious on whether or not they were looking for a reason to have a delay or looking for a reason to remove phones. Because Monday, Tuesday, other people was accredited media covering the stuff. Wednesday, I started live tweeting. Thursday, they're now taking away our phones, so I can't live tweet anymore, even in the hallway. And then that continued on Friday. I couldn't live tweet even in the hallway. I had to wait till lunch or after when I got my phone back. So that kind of happened, and I found that a little peculiar.
I've got a little comment on that too. I spoke to the individual, and I said, so what happened? Like, did they catch you in the courtroom? Like, what was going on? And he said that he had like a Bluetooth, she, them. They said that they've got like, Bluetooth in their glasses, and they had these glasses that have a Bluetooth speaker in them in their bag, and they kind of went through security. And
there's a camera in there too, though, Danielle.
When it went through the security thing, they could see that all these little wires and everything were in the glasses, and they stopped them at that point. And I asked them after, I said, did they ask you which courtroom you were going into? They did not. They had not been asked where they were previously and where they were going to, or if they had used them in court or any of that. So I found that really interesting. I mean, they might have known just from the crowd that was there, or made those assumptions, but I thought, well, it was never technically established that this person was in our courtroom or had used them in the courtroom or any of that. So there wasn't really a breach in a sense. And it hadn't really been nailed to our situation technically. So you might be right. I don't know. I just found that the details were a little bit weird around that. Around the assumptions that this was a breach, in the men's courtroom. Yeah.
No, it felt a little bit like the case itself, a small little item, glasses that have a camera that weren't used, weren't turned on, and didn't capture anything, getting exploded into this big security breach issue where we're all having to deal with it. Kind of feels like this entire case itself, blowing something out of proportion, calling it security, making people scared, and taking action against a whole bunch of people when nobody actually did anything yet. Feels familiar. Just going to put that out there. And then on Friday, we came back. So the rest of Thursday, actually, no, there's some more notes for Thursday. And then about 3:11, this is where we started to get back into court, and the judge said to the Crown, if you find any recordings or anybody else doing stuff, you're going to take action against them, basically warning the crowd that the Crown, who's highly litigious, will be coming after anybody who's breaking this no recording thing. As far as I'm concerned, as far as I know, nobody did, even before or after that ban or that the security breach. But that was put out there. And it also took a good hour out of our day to deal with that issue too. And then at 3:25, we got back into the argument of the publication ban. So now we're on Thursday, and the Crown brought up the publication ban again. So I'll explain to people what the publication ban is for, because I'm allowed to do that. It's to stop the information that's in that sealed envelope from being reported on or publicized, and to stop the decision that can come out of that envelope if it's opened or otherwise, to stop that. So quite frankly, what this is a truth ban. Now, because I opposed it on Tuesday, I talked to Catherine on Tuesday and said, look, I'm going to oppose this publication ban because I'm representing myself, and I would also represent independent media, because the Crown said that they spoke to a representative from mainstream media. He did admit it wasn't all of mainstream media, but it was several of them, and they had no problem with the publication ban. So I want to let Canada know that your media didn't even oppose the application from the Crown to keep stuff private and secret. That's a huge red flag to me, because they absolutely should be opposing it. And they did oppose the defense one. The judge didn't agree with them, but they did oppose the defense one. But they didn't oppose the Crown one. I made it known that I would, and then I got called up. So first the defense went up to oppose it. And then, kind of surprisingly to me, or not, my situation started to come up. They said there's a gentleman here that would also oppose it. And I'm like, oh, I think that's me. And then sure enough, they asked me to come up, and I went up and spoke to the judge. So I'm now on the record opposing the publication ban from the Crown on the grounds that the information needs to get out and justice needs to be seen. I said that there's family and friends who would like to understand this information who can't physically be here. They got to be at work. And this is how the media is supposed to get this information out. So I opposed it. It didn't work. So the Crown got their publication ban around that information. And then they started talking about that information in more detail, which I do feel is covered under that publication ban at this point, because it's now in effect from the judge. They're now talking about more of the contents of that envelope. And this is why my notes end at this point, because I do think that that's too close to the line. Danielle, what do you think about that assessment?
Yeah, I never really thought about it before, but that legacy media lawyer that had been involved with all the other things wasn't there. And she was available like in June. If they needed her, they would adjourn.
The
for
Crown
5
said
minutes,
we can
get
call her
on
if
the
you need her.
phone. She's on the
Yep.
camera. She was there now. Any question would pop up. She was there. So yeah, why weren't you opposing this? I've kind of read the old rulings from the other publication bans when the media is allowed to write about stuff about these guys, but then the ruling on this one was, well, and I heard the judge say this, it isn't only about fairness of trial for the accused, it's also for the Crown.
That's right.
So
they wanted to maintain the integrity of the Crown.
We need to maintain the case for the Crown. And I spent most of yesterday trying to look into that, looking into the criminal code and all of that, and how, everything I read says the fair trial for the accused in criminal notebooks, everything, all of this law stuff for fair trial of the accused. And now all of a sudden there's talk of for fair trial for the Crown. So I'm scouring to find where that is a legitimate reason to grant a publication ban for the fairness of the trial for the Crown. It didn't make much sense considering what's been published on these men already. They're, when they're talking about jury selection, it's going to be impossible for jury selection, and that makes it unfair for the Crown. Well, I'm a little blown away by that publication ban, and I'm a little bit pissed off about it. I think that there's been other ones that have been released where, the guys, it's fine if you say what you want about the guys and get that all out there, whatever these ITOs said. Unproven things in court are being submitted for the media to use, but not this. So that one's got me a little ticked, because I'm not sure the fairness. I mean, if there's misconduct on the part of the Crown, your fairness does not matter to me. I don't care if you have another dude sitting or another person sitting in that chair. You are all the Crown. It's the same thing. So I'm a little ticked about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be incredibly accurate, it is a temporary publication ban at this point. He did highlight that. It's not a permanent one yet, so he may remove it later. But he also said it's not a seal either. He's not sealing the documents. So if anybody wants to, they can physically go look at it, read it, and understand what's in there, but they can't put it into publication while the temporary publication ban's in place. And I'm going to refer to this as a truth ban, because the first one from the defense was to stop this false narrative that was being put out there in the press to help the jury, to make sure that they're not getting full of that information. I think we all agree with that, and the court agreed with that. And also, during this argument, the judge reminded the prosecution or the Crown that, hey, when the defense was asking for a publication ban on your information, you opposed it, and you said the public can understand and they can make sense of this, and all you need to do is give the jury some instructions. The judge reminded the prosecution that they made those arguments when the defense wanted a publication ban. Now they're on the other side saying that they need to protect us. At the end, the judge did say it was for the integrity of the legal system and the Crown's office that he was putting that in place. I don't think the judge understands something, and I think this opens the door for us, Danielle. And this is where one of these documents or one of these things we can do comes into play. I'm going to file for an injunction. I'm going to do a motion to get an injunction to allow independent media in. And I'm going to use this publication ban specifically as a grounds for my application. Because what this publication ban actually did was it created only mis, dis, and malinformation to be allowed in the public sphere. And anybody attempting to correct mis, dis, or malinformation in itself is breaking the publication ban by reporting truth. So the only thing that can go out there to the jury pool in Alberta right now is mis, dis, and malinformation about this envelope, which means the Crown, CBC, and others can go ahead and start softening the fall for the Crown and maybe covering for them with mis, dis, and malinformation. And we can't tell the truth. So because of this decision, Danielle, and because of that particular part of this decision, I believe we now have grounds to file an application or a motion for an injunction to have that addressed, so that in November or the next time I'm in court, I'm able to first report. And second, because it's a temporary publication ban, we might be able to have it overturned with some good arguments. Now, this is not going to be filed in their case. It's going to be filed against Alberta courts themselves, because this is a blanket statement I'm making. I think from going forward, unaccredited media like me should have the option and opportunity to become live media. And what should happen, in my opinion, is I should fill out a form and say, I want to be live media. And if I make a mistake, I don't follow the rules, or I do something wrong, I lose that privilege, because I believe it should be a privilege, not a right. And that's the way it should be done. I shouldn't have to become accredited, which means government approved, in order to media functions. So because of that publication ban, Danielle, I'm going to leverage that as grounds for an application to sue the Alberta courts in order to get that reversed, the whole fact that that exists, and to have the right to be able to be media inside of those courts. I see Don nodding his head, so I'm going to let you go to you and see, do you think that's a decent strategy? And of course, Danielle and Granny, the lawyers will be aware of this, and we'll talk to them before anything happens. But I think that opened the door for me. What do you think, Donald?
Well, first of all, legacy media is bought and paid for by the government. They've sold their souls a long time ago. We know that. They lie. They're just a propaganda arm. Too bad. But there's so much good independent media out there. And as you found out, Jason, when you looked into the rules, those rules are established to keep out independent media. Those rules are established to just let the legacy media rule the roost, and that's what's happened here. It's about time that we stopped letting that happen. I applaud your move, and I hope you do it, and I'll work hard with you if you need me to assist in any way. I think that would be a big victory for truth and all Canadians.
Absolutely, and I think it's worth the effort, because if Alberta passes that could become binding, or it could become persuasive on the other courts across Canada. So if you're in Ontario, you can point to the precedents in Alberta if we complete that. And then coast to coast, we can have independent media there. And again, I believe it's a privilege. I don't think it should be a right. It should be a privilege, and you can lose that privilege if you don't follow the rules. I'm cool with that. I'm just not cool with the fact that you have to be government approved first. That needs to go away. All right. And this is also the day that we found out it was going to be a sad day Friday, because at the end of this is when the judge said, I'm not making a decision right now. It's going to take me time. This is case law. We're creating new case law. I got to take my time on this one. So the comment from the Crown was, you can wait till the end of trial, judge, to open that envelope. You out of your mind. But the judge says, I can open it. The latest I'll open it up is the first day of trial. It still blows my mind. That's the end of May 2024. And then he also said, but I could open it up sooner. So Danielle, we're hoping the latest he'll open it up is November 1, which is the next scheduled court date. But I have spoken to some lawyers, Danielle, because the Crown rested, and we heard those words said. The Crown said he's rested on this issue, and he's even been recused. He's no longer part of it. And because the defense has rested, the decision can come out at any time. The judge could schedule a court date like he did with Chris Carbert's voluntariness. Like all of a sudden we heard about a court date. He could do that and then come out with his decision because arguments aren't needed anymore. So you don't actually have to schedule with both sides to be there. You can give them notice a decision's coming out, but you don't have to schedule with them to be there. Because a decision could be read on the record and anybody can hear it. So there is a potential possibility. Again, this is all in the hands of that judge, where he can announce his decision before November 1st. Now, to be clear to everybody, we believe this decision will change the entire court case. It could even toss it out. We don't know. But the judge did say he still has to be persuaded that it is what the defense says it is if he decides to even open it. So we need a bunch of wins for this to work out. And the Crown only needs one win for it to not work out for us. So we'll have to see where that goes. And I do understand, and the men do understand, because I did speak to two of them about this delay. They're not happy about the delay, but if it leads to their freedom and it leads to their good name coming out, they're okay with it, because it's case law. So judges take extra time to make sure when they make case law that it's the right one, because going forward, what his decision here is going to affect how all other times this happens in the future. So I do respect the fact he's taking his time on it. I just hope it's the right decision in the end. So at the end of Thursday, that's when we all really realized they're not getting out this week, because they're now talking about bringing in a witness and continuing on the application for disclosure, which is what happened before the CC1 application was introduced. They were working on disclosure around scribe notes and getting information out. And then to remind everybody who's listening, again, these are delay tactics by the Crown. In order to get this disclosure, we had to have arguments all day Friday. So before I get into Friday, Danielle, do you think I missed anything else from Thursday and before we get to Friday? Because that's the end of the CC1 application arguments, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, right?
Yeah, I can't really think of anything. I do know that he said that he would have his decision by the first day of the trial, which I think
he said the latest he would have it.
And thought, oh my gosh, we have to wait. But no, I don't think he knew what date. He didn't know what date. So I think that was just a technicality. He says this is for technicality reasons. For the books, I'll have it done before that. So yeah, that's all we kind of were left at. And I think it's a little bit disheartening. And a lot of people were disheartened after that day on Thursday. And then to come back in Friday and continue on with where we had been before. But honestly, Friday was very productive. We got into Friday and we got a lot more information.
We'll get into Friday in 1 second.
Yeah.
We'll get to one second. I just want to get to Granny about Thursday first. So Granny, at this point, this is when we learned they're not coming out this week. The family understood it. We all started kind of understanding that they're not coming out this week. And there was a rumor of August 8th being the next court date, and this came out of Chris Lysick, so there's a misunderstanding there. And then a lot of people understood that it was going to be November. So at this point, friends and family and you and Danielle and myself started to understand they're not coming out this week. Can you tell us how that kind of changed for you and how your feelings around that?
Well, I don't think any of us slept Thursday night, man included. The man they really struggled that night, as we all did. I don't think one of us slept. I was up by 4 a.m. because there's no sense in tossing and turning, and it was mentally hard. And I feel like we've all been put in dead time. We talk about that. The guys don't know a date. Yeah, they've heard a trial date. They keep hoping something else will happen. So we're kind of all living in dead time around this envelope now. And it's hard to mentally handle for us. I can only imagine how it was feeling for the man. And that's where my head always goes. I always worry about them. Because I know they're going to phone me. And I'm thinking, what am I going to say? What are my words going to be to help them move through this horrible moment of understanding nothing's happening?
Yeah.
Because it's like you go up, you go down, you go up, you go down. It's emotionally taxing. And all of us woke up that morning, Jason and Danielle, none of us had slept. We were all exhausted and a little bit angry.
Yeah, I started to feel hurt by the justice system at that part because the arguments I heard were compelling to me. And you can say I'm biased because I'm for freedom. So I'm really listening to how this innocence and freedom stuff is really kicking in. So I really thought that the Crown made poor arguments, not persuasive. Some of them made sense, but they were vitiated by the defense's counter arguments or arguments. And I really thought, yeah, for sure, the decision should be relatively easy. And I even added some optimism to people that night, hoping and praying that the judge would write 2 decisions, one for and one against, so that he could quickly make a decision the next day. There was no attempt to do that, absolutely not. And maybe one night it was too optimistic on my part to give the judge to make that decision because, again, it's case law. But we continued Friday morning as if nothing was going on. We went right back to the other application, but we all were somber, and the men walked in for the first time without smiles. So all 4 days prior to this, they all had huge smiles on their face. Friday morning, they did not. So that set the tone for Friday. And then one of the first things I noticed was Stephen Johnson was in the court. So I had to go and clarify with people, why is he there? I thought there was a recusal. So to clarify to everybody here, there was a recusal, but it was a recusal for the CC1 application arguments only because he was the core of those applications. So he was recused on that portion of the arguments just for that application. He wasn't recused from the entire case. So that we got some clarification on Friday. Now, Donald, I'm going to come to you because this is a piece of information that we had before, and we thought that he was recused from the entire case. And again, because there's no media there, nobody actually had an accurate recording of that. And this is one of the highlighted problems I want to put out there, is because there was no media at all, we had a confusion around, was he recused from the entire claim or just part of it? Now we had that information updated on Friday. So for you, how did that change your opinion of what was going on?
Well, whether it's about one issue or the entire case, that makes a difference. It's important, but still, let's remember the words that we heard. We heard that the Crown could be a defendant. We heard that the Crown could be a witness. And you know, the fact that it's about whatever's in that envelope, you know, in 45 years in and around the court, I have never seen this before in my life. I suspect it's the same with you, Jason.
Well, we can confirm it's never happened because now case law has to happen.
Right. I mean, this is incredible.
Yep.
But once again,
and that's Canada-wide, sorry.
Right. And in context, you know, we have grave suspicions. Well, we know that the whole thing, that the politicians knew about the arrest days ahead of the arrest. which means there's a political influence, and you've seen my article about the whole politics surrounding the handling of the evidence, and that's all solid. Those observations are solid. Okay. So once again, here we have something that's, we believe, will seriously undermine the Crown's case, maybe even to the point where the Crown just has to walk away. Let's hope, because we know the whole thing stinks anyway.
Absolutely. And then Friday, and thanks for those comments, Donald. And Friday was not under publication ban. So everything that happens on Friday is open and clear. These are not even close to the publication ban, these arguments on the application for disclosure. So we had an officer, Danielle, how do you say his last name? Kaninsky? How do you say it? Kevin Kaninsky?
Knetsky, yeah.
Kaninsky?
Yeah.
Why can't everybody just be Smith number one? So it's easier for me. Yeah, Kaninsky. He's the RCMP officer, and I believe he is a chief superintendent. And what we learned from him is there's these layers of command that got put in place. So gold, silver, bronze is what they call it. This is a program that came out of the UK, and it's how they set up the command. And he was one of the commanders for the silver level. He explained to us that the gold level is more senior, then it goes down to silver. So gold and silver talk, and then silver and bronze talk. Gold and bronze don't talk. So silver is kind of important, and they bring their messaging down and bring the information back and forth. And he was the superintendent commander of the silver level. Now, Danielle, can you kind of bring us up to speed? Because I wasn't here when the application for disclosure itself was started. I came along with the CC1 application started, but I don't know really what was the reason for the application for disclosure. I'm hearing scribe notes and stuff like that. Can you kind of recap us all why there's an application for disclosure and this officer got called?
Yeah, so back in June, this officer was up as a witness, and in their conversations with the Crown and the defense asked about his scribes. So scribes are a person that is hired to come along and take notes. So there was so much going on in Coutts, and it was pretty important to capture all this information so that there's a person along with him writing everything down as it's going on. Different meetings, all sorts of communications, so that he had something to refer to, and they are also important for court procedures. So in all that, he described that he had a scribbler, like 2 different scribblers that he would do handwritten notes in. And it was discovered at that time that he also had typed notes from a scribe. So 2 separate, he thought that he had 3 scribes. We found out on Friday, oh, I was mistaken. I only had 2. This other one was around, but she wasn't working for me. Again, like a lot of time's gone by. So these guys are forgetting stuff, right? So it kind of got exposed that there was these typed written notes from a scribe. So instead of somebody writing on a piece of paper, somebody had a computer and was typing. And it was discovered by the defense at that point, we don't have those notes. We do not have the typed written scribe notes from this officer. So that's where like a lot of, that's when kind of stuff came out. And I think that's when things were given to the defense that were maybe the wrong version was given to the defense when they said, oh, we got to go and look at this. They asked the officer to go get his notes from his vehicle. He had brought all of his notes from Coutts, so they asked him to go in and retrieve them from his vehicle. And when he came back in, the defense asked if they could see those notes firsthand. And what they were able to see was the unredacted versions, right? So there was things that had been blacked out in the copies that they had been given, and this was an unredacted version. So they were able to see some information in there that got them really excited. And at first they thought, oh, they call it a inadvertent disclosure. Not really supposed to have seen that. And of course it happens in law. It happens with us. You send the wrong email, send something to the wrong person in a message. Oops.
Or it was leaked.
Yeah, something like that. So
we don't know. Somebody may have done that.
Yeah, who knows? But no, so whatever was in there, I mean, it got the lawyers pretty excited, like when they first seen it. And as the week went on, like back in June, they were getting more and more excited. So whatever it was that they'd seen, I've heard rumors. I don't remember where I heard this, but I do believe it was kind of from one of the through one of the lawyers, that the information that they saw, and the information in this envelope is 4 lines Don't quote me on that because it was it has just been rumored to me, but I've heard that it's only 4 lines of information. So it's a big one. I don't know that there's much else in there that they saw, but whatever it was, there was 4 lines that showed that seemingly there was activities, everything was going along in this track. 4 lines of communication happened, and they used the term 180. Everything just did a 180 after this. The police did a 180.
Their actions,
Their actions, yeah. So they talked a lot about what the actions of the police were before and after this bit of communication happened, and what kind of took off after
and for the lawyers out there, I'm just going to say a line that was said that will make all lawyers understand this. This is not just a Charter 8 section violation. There's more to it than that. So for lawyers to understand that, a Section 8 Charter violations around search and seizure, and that in itself is a bad violation. But for the defense to say, but it's not just that, there's more to it, really emphasizes that there's a criminality section to this.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so I just want to put that in there for the lawyers listening, because if the lawyer hears that, they're like, oh my gosh, this is like serious.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think we got a little bit more information about kind of surrounding that, and they questioned him some more. Is there any more information that we possibly don't have? They also asked him, did you give everything to the Crown that you had? And he says, no, I have. There's a chain of command. He's in the Silver Command. So in the Silver, there's always, like, we went through this a little bit better in June with the command structures. So this was a little bit more of a breakdown with the command structures. And they had said, like, there's a event file coordinator that works for them.
Right.
And everything goes to that person. It's not the actual officer who's submitting things to the Crown. Everything they have goes to this file coordinator. So I wouldn't be surprised to see in the future this file coordinator is up as a witness as well, just to kind of see, maybe there's something there as far as the information getting passed on. I'm not sure. But it does seem that we got a lot more information as far as the command structure. They talked a lot about that in June, and they kind of ended it at Silver. He was the top guy there in Silver, and that's where it ended. They talked about gold. They mentioned that gold is never really on site. They're the ones doing the strategic kind of thing, the bigger
in
plan.
Edmonton too, I believe, right? They were located in Edmonton.
Yeah, they were in Edmonton. They're not on site. It got changed. Originally, the command structure was wasn't even gold, silver, bronze, and then it got changed twice after that, like before that. And even who was in those positions was changed and manipulated kind of early on as well. So then we got more information about the gold level, because that was kind of my kind. I was like, who's gold? Like, it sounds like a movie, right? Who's gold? Who's calling all the shots behind the scenes? We didn't have any of that. Yeah, we didn't have any of that information in June. So we got a lot more clarity on who was gold and how many different golds were involved and all of that, and where they were operating out of, and what their job was, and what their role was. So for me, it gave me a little bit more clarity of the who's and the hows and that kind of a structure for them. But it's quite interesting for anybody interested in the law or anything like that to see how these command structures are set up. And you got to think they're also working with the inset group, like the national security was there, and then all that kind of thing. It's interesting. Like, bronze is all, like, the guys you saw on the ground, that's bronze. So we kind of, like, I'm kind of naive to all of it. I kind of think, like, oh, whoever we're seeing there, they're all in charge and they're calling the shots. The bronze team is the ones that were actually the foot soldiers on the ground,
right,
doing all the work. So they're the undercovers. They're the guys with the big guns walking around. They're the ones that kind of way. And even the checkpoint officers, that's a whole nother group again. That's a parameter, like, that's a whole nother team of people. So these groups aren't talking to each other either. I don't know if anybody watched the Emergencies Act inquiry, and we kind of watched this, like, gong show go down where it was like, OPP isn't talking to the police, and all of these people, it's that guy's fault. Well, we weren't communicating with them. Well, did you talk to that guy from that group? I think so. So it was the same thing in Coutts. I think there was a lot of groups and a lot of levels of command, and who's talking to who's giving information to the other groups and the teams. That was somebody's job. But it really does sound like there was so much, like this witness has said multiple times, it was so crazy all the time that it was almost impossible to keep up with even he would get asked questions. Did you have that communication in private? Did you write it? How did that communicate? I don't really remember. I think it was probably in person, but I don't really remember. So there was a lot of confusion even as to who was communicating with who within the other agencies. So you can easily see where this is going as far, like, I don't know. This is just kind of from watching the Emergencies Act and watching the the Ottawa Police Service start to slowly get thrown under the bus, slowly, up there under the bus. So we're kind of watching that a little bit right now, I think, with maybe even the police, the bronze, and the police getting actually thrown under the bus right now for things. It's almost kind of familiar in that way.
Yeah. All right. So that brings us to really Friday, where he takes a stand again. So thank you for bringing up all the scribe, all the information there that brought us to this point. But the first thing we started off with was the Crown was wasting time. He was acting confused, didn't understand what was going on at this point. This is Stephen Johnson who's up there. And by the way, this is also another tactic that the Crown has been using the last couple days on the trial, is they start to talk really softly, and then you can hardly hear them. Like, we had to have them keep being reminded to speak up. Just so you know, Danielle, they do that because in the record is very difficult. But anyways, they started to talk really soft when you couldn't hear them. So Steve Johnson was wasting a bunch of time, and then the judge himself said, "I would like to get to the business, please." Trying to move him along. So yet another indicator from the judge that he's not for the delay tactics. He wants to get on with things. But one of the first things that happened here, Danielle, and the rest of everybody watching, is the defense immediately recognized that there's some new binders and there's some new information that appears to be up there. So they asked to go take a look at some of the stuff that he's brought to the table here. And one of the first things was there was a large binder, which was supposed to represent a binder that the defense had that only had 26 pages in it, but this other binder had a lot more pages in it. So there was a little bit of a back and forth about talking what was going on. And this is one of the first times they cleared the entire courtroom out during discussions that were happening. So the judge was out. So this is not technically public anymore. When the judge is gone, they can actually close it. And that's what they did. So we were first listening to the conversation between the defense, the witness, and the Crown about these missing documents. And then we were booted as they finished that conversation. And then when we came back in, the first comment out of the defense was, there's 2 pieces of disclosure here we don't have. We want to make a stink about it. We want to talk about it. But the judge's decision at that point was to keep the matter moving forward, not to adjourn and stop on this disclosure issue. But he did say, we're going to address this disclosure issue shortly. Like, we'll still do that. We're not going to make a decision right now, but we'll keep moving. So we're already, Danielle, this is like the 4th time that I'm aware of that the defense is finding missing information, missing documents from this source, this particular type of witness. Is it not?
Yeah, I don't know that we actually found it, like that they actually were able to get any more information. Oh, well, he did. He had a binder that he had readjusted, and they needed to check that, make sure it's all just been what he said. It's only just been organized since June. It hasn't been manipulated since June. And he had other notes there that kind of described in detail more the command structures that hadn't been used in court in June. But again, the defense had to take time and go through that and make sure that there wasn't anything in there that they had missed from before. So, I mean, the defense is obviously, it's a disclosure application. So that's the primary reason that this man is, that this officer's here, that we're in court today. Every little thing is kind of gone through with a fine-tooth comb.
Yeah,
but it did turn out that all of the information, it did turn out that I think we do have everything from him now. I'm not sure, but no,
there's 2 more documents that they paused the discussion arguments about. The Crown was prepared to go forward with that. The defense highlighted to the court that there's 2 documents that they don't have. Whether or not the Crown gave it to them after that point or not, I don't know. But I do know that the witness said, yes, I gave it to our file manager people, like that you were speaking about before. And then they should have given it to the Crown. So there was a discussion on at that
those
point.
are the 2 things that I just spoke on. The one binder with the command structure, and then the other binder that he had submitted previously that he has manipulated, because it's
Danielle,
now
sorry.
well, I don't want to say manipulated, but it is now in order. He put it in order for dates. But
that's not the document they're talking about. We don't know what it. No, we don't actually know because they cleared the court. So you're right. He chronologically ordered one of his binders. That's correct. But that wasn't new documents for the defense. There's 2 documents we actually don't know what they said is missing. And they could be wrong. They may have a copy. That's why the discussion had to be postponed to another time so we can continue Friday with the witness. And that's why there's no decision on whether or not anything is missing, because the defense and the Crown both wanted to continue that conversation. It could be no documents missing for all we know. They just have to find them. And we also don't know if they're relevant or not. That's still yet to come. But this witness is where I first started to hear things like hundreds of guns and thousands of ammunition at the Smuggler's Saloon. So they said they had some information that possibly something was happening at Smuggler's Saloon with hundreds of guns and thousands of ammunition. And this is also the first time I heard the witness talk about a religious church group being associated with a cache of guns. And this was on February 9th. So several days before the 13th when arrests were happening. And the religious movement had a stash of arms. This is the quotes from this particular witness. Now, Danielle, we won't get into it very deep, but what's the name of this religious group that they're referring to? Because I believe it's a local church.
It's a church in Fort Macleod called the Netherlands Reform. So I believe that's more of like a Dutch church. There is a lot of Dutch churches around the area. So that's just one of the many that exist in southern Alberta. Yeah, and it's right in Fort Macleod. Yeah.
Right.
So they tried to say that was their original undercover operation was on this church. They heard that this church had extremist views. They tried to say something about they might have had guns or something like that. Like I think they were stretching on that one with the extremist views from the religion. There's a article from 2017 from this church, and they're comparing 2 small southern Alberta towns. You got to think this is pre-COVID, about the low vaccination rates in Fort Macleod, and they pegged this church out in the CBC article as being predominantly one of the communities within Fort Macleod that kind of promotes not vaccinating and that kind of stuff. So it's interesting if you get looking around. This church was being looked at 6 years ago, even for their promotion of non-vaccination or that kind of way. So I mean, who knows? They were digging around for somebody. Yeah.
It looked like at this point they were looking for someone to say, hey, this is an extremist group, and they started with that maybe because of their COVID policies prior, and people know about that. But what we can say is no stash of gun was found with this religious church, and there was nothing actually directly involved, as we found out later. And they actually twisted the narrative later to be diagonal on. So no longer was this church, it was later diagonal on, which was this group that was associated with these guns. You can see the narrative falling apart here, folks, as the truth is coming out. On February 11th, so I'm going to skip some of the testimony because some of it was not really all that relevant. And if you want a full recap, you can go to the Friday episode where we did a full recap. But on February 11th, this is when we first heard hearing about the offenses that they're considering to charge people with. So written in his notes was offenses being considered was conspiracy to murder, blocking of an international infrastructure, something along those lines, mischief of 5,000 K plus, and firearms trafficking. So on February 11th at 9:30 a.m., during a meeting with the silver people and gold, they were already coming up with the charges, which they used 2 days later. Now, I'm highlighting this to you all because it was supposed to be an intimate issue. It was supposed to be happening real time. This is why they skipped some warrant steps and stuff like that, because it's supposed to be intimate. But yet on February 11th, they're looking at a church. They're coming up with charges, but they don't have people yet associated with this. In fact, they were first looking at, I guess it was Marco, Alex, and team as the leadership. And then they started to identify a security detail, which would have been, I think, 14 other people. But they weren't naming names at this point, and they didn't have specific people that they were targeting. I found this to be very peculiar. And Don, I'm actually going to go to you on this one because some of the warrants they got were imminent danger. It was going to happen right away. Massive information, large cache, hundreds of guns. Now, with all of that happening in the real time, fog of war, we can leave it at that for a bit. We now know after the fact, there wasn't hundreds of guns. There was a dozen. There wasn't a massive nationwide organization or a local church involved. That came out in the POEC. That never happened. And they also were saying there's leaders outside of Alberta who are instructing these guys, and not a single person has been arrested, charged, investigated, or even inquired with. Not a single name has come up who these outside of Alberta leaders might be. So at this day, on February 11th, the narrative's already been constructed. We found out after, through the POC, that the narrative is based on false information. So, Donald, as a police officer, what's going on here? Because it's not based on intelligence, it's based on something else at this stage.
All right. I'll be charitable a little bit, and then I'll be realistic. Look, police officers, they move ahead quite often on an urgent basis because something important is there, and you do the best. I have personally kicked in the door to a person's home where it turns out there was nothing there, and it was the wrong home, and the whole thing was wrong. It was all wrong. And that happened very quickly because somebody said, once again, there was a gun there and there was a guy hiding and the whole works. Well, they had the wrong street and all of that. So these accidents happen. It's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about, first of all, political direction of an investigation that's happening many provinces away, and where they knew 3-4 days in advance that they're making up the charges that they need, but they don't yet have the men. They're thinking about this church, and I don't think the Coutts Four are anything to do with that. So
No,
basically, you know the old saying, the communist saying, "Show me the man, I'll show you the crime." No, it was reversed in this case. We need a crime. We need to find some guns. What? There's nothing in the church? Well, gosh, choose someone else. And I think that pretty well describes what happened here. And once again, I just want to go right back to the undercover officers, the ladies who were there. They went in deliberately not recording their conversations. The recording devices are so small, they're so hidden. Apple watches, pens, earrings built into bras, whatever they want to do. They could have gone in and they could have, and these recording devices, they record for days now in such high quality.
Yeah.
They made a decision to not record their conversations.
Can I interject quickly there?
Yep.
They made a decision not to record or not to disclose. That's all I can really say right now.
Right. I mean, look, if there are recordings and they've hidden them and it's found out, I think that's silver bracelets time. I think that's handcuffing the police time.
Right, because we don't have any evidence that they didn't. They actually didn't say that yet. They didn't say that in court yet.
I know, but
but it's not disclosed. We do know that.
I heard something from the media, something about that. But anyway, the bottom line is this. If there are recordings and they haven't been revealed, well, that's because they contain exculpatory evidence or they're lying about what the guy said. And if there aren't recordings, if they made that decision, well, you know what? Looks to me, in light of everything else politically happening here, maybe they made that decision so they could make the men say anything they wanted to.
And Donald, I just want to highlight one thing. We don't know what the criminal activity in that envelope is. We know there's 4 lines, and we now know that hiding information as exculpatory is a crime. Putting it out there.
Yep. Well, as we spoke about before, falsely putting words in a suspect's mouth is called scripting. Did these undercover officers script any of the Coutts Four? I'm very doubtful. I'm very doubtful about the integrity of this investigation. You've read my article. I am disgusted by some of the things I've seen so far. So I just want the truth. Can we get at the truth? Do we have to wait another year to get at the truth while these men rot in jail because they are political prisoners?
Absolutely, 100%. And at this point, we did find out that there was 2 groups that they were targeting: leadership, security detail. Leadership had 4 people. There was a conversation about arresting the leadership on February 12th, and then the decision was made not to arrest them on February 12th because they thought that they would be assisting or able to assist in a peaceful arrest of everybody else or something along those lines. They thought that that would be too much for this crowd. Now, again, I want to emphasize to everybody what the RCMP officers said during the arrest of the 4 men. This was imminent danger. They kept saying imminent danger, but yet they're deciding on whether or not to arrest the leaders, and then decide not to arrest the leaders because they're worried that it will cause the crowd to get angry. I think what they're admitting there, without realizing it, it wasn't an angry protest. It wasn't a violent protest, and they were going to keep it that way by not arresting the leadership. But they did go for security details, as they called them. So now we're into, look at my notes here. Yeah, so now we're into learning that there's federal involvement. So the RCMP HQ in Ottawa are now providing information and directions. We're also hearing that they're not all recorded, not through phone, not on paper, but verbal. So they're getting orders verbally from people on the ground who are connected to HQ in Ottawa. So we don't even have disclosure and documents around this, a lot of this stuff. And that was bothering me a lot, Donald, because you're getting orders from federal or agencies, but no paper trail. You're talking in the field verbally between 2 people, but no paper trail. And then we also learned that several times, and the defense brought this out, several times they asked the scribes to leave the room. So they would have private conversations, not recorded, on purpose. And they would tell us, this witness would tell us, they would do that for the privacy of the operation. Donald, I'm getting really frustrated with the lack of paper trail when it comes to international security issues. How is it that we have this coast-to-coast international security issue, but we have the HQ from Ottawa talking verbally, non-recorded, and they're actually taking the scribes and taking them out of the room during certain portions? What does that say to you when
Okay, well,
you look at this?
first of all, I've got a question for you because I wasn't in court and I haven't been in court to hear everything you've heard. And I don't want anyone to answer if it's against the any of the publication bans. But I want to know who was in the room with the police while they were discussing this. Were there civilians? Any politicians? Anybody from the federal government? Any federal government employee? Because once again, do we have politicians, governments, directly influencing and running a police operation? I mean, we've seen that, and it's not supposed to happen. So there's my question. Do we know who was in the room, and was there anyone other than police officers?
So we kind of have that answer, sort of. So there's 2 meetings I want to bring to your attention. Meeting number 1, which is this client solicitor stuff, which is part of the disclosure from the CC1 application. That meeting itself, there's an application for disclosure on who was there. The Crown's denied that application and has not told the people who are there. The reason why there's an application for disclosure about that meeting is if anybody else other than the RCMP or Crown are there, privilege is waived. There is no privilege if there's somebody who's not a lawyer and not the client in that meeting. So the defense is working hard to get disclosure on that particular meeting on who was there. The Crown is not given that information, and I can see why, because it's not going to help them. I bet you there was somebody that shouldn't have been there, which would then mean privilege is gone, which would mean no case law needed, which would mean we open that envelope. So that particular meeting, the Crown is hiding the attendees of that one. The stuff that happened in the command center with gold and silver, we learned that there was a lot of org charts written out and pictures were taken, and it changed a lot. But we also learned that not everybody's name got on there because of the kerfuffle and confusion. And we also learned that federal justice people were involved. So there was the RCMP HQ in Ottawa and the Justice Department in Ottawa federally involved. I don't know the names of the people, what their involvement was, because again, a lot of those conversations were done verbally or without scribe. So I don't have those answers yet, but I know that the defense is trying to find out exactly that question, Donald, because for the exact reason you laid it out, it matters who's there in the command center and who's actually contributing to that. So with that information, Donald, that they are hiding at least one meeting because there's an application for disclosure on that particular item. And now we're finding out Friday they had flip charts or pull charts or tear charts, and they took pictures of them.
Well, we'll see. We'll see. But once again, we're a year and a half into this with these men rotting in jail, these political prisoners, a year and a half, and we still don't have the case from the Crown yet. We're still looking for disclosure. Pardon?
Yeah, we're fighting for the evidence. Like, we want the evidence. It should be disclosed.
Right, exactly. And they've withheld evidence, and they strategically did a dump of thousands of pages just a few hours before the trial was supposed to start. That, once again, that's deliberate. That's malicious. It just shows what's happening here. They are desperate for a conviction. They want a conviction.
They need
They're desperate for it. Oh, they need it. They need it. I'm going to love to hear what's in that brown envelope, that sealed brown envelope.
You're absolutely right, Donald. And yeah, they need it. They need this to hold up because it was the foundation for the POEC's decision. And we even saw in Rouleau's report, he said a line that he was convinced that Diagolon was what the government said it was. That is what he believed, and that's what he based his decision on. That belief is completely false. That's fabricated. That was told to him, and that's the same belief that was told to the bail judge in this matter as well. We might get to the bail judge at the end of this. At this part of the testimony, this is when we found out that the RCMP admits they disabled 3 excavators. He was asked about who decided that or who did that. He actually didn't give us who decided that, but he told us who did it. It was the emergency response team at the RCMP. And then he even gave testimony that they cut wires, put foam into things, and disabled them. Didn't really talk about why they did that. So the testimony did not come out why. They didn't say anything like, we thought they were going to tear up the roads with it, or we thought they were going to attack police cars, or they thought. They didn't give the reason why they disabled these excavators. And it's my understanding they were brought there to put up a large flag. They were going to do something along that line. They were going to display something large so that you can see it. But for some reason, the police thought it was going to be a problem, and they went and physically disabled them on private property. And yeah, that was the testimony we got. Complete admission on that one. Cutting the wires, foam. And also, I was asked whether or not they got legal advice for that. The Crown objected and said, look, that's going to be privilege. And then the defense said, no, we're not asking for the advice. We're asking for if there was advice. So then the witness had to leave, come back in, and answered that question. And no, they didn't seek legal advice, civil or otherwise. They just went ahead with the decision made by the gold level to go ahead and disable them. Now, I think personally, Donald, sidebar, that was to provoke a reaction. That was to cause people to get upset. And ironically, Tony is the one who had a live stream complaining about the excavators being disabled on the 13th, just hours before he was arrested. So I wonder, putting it out there, whether or not that's what put Tony on their radar. So the fact that he complained about these excavators, got a bit of a reaction. He wasn't, violent in any way, shape, or form. He was just upset that they went and did that and disabled his equipment. So that might have been what put Tony on their radar. And I'm highlighting that because prior to that, Tony has nothing to do with anything, like at all. So why he was even being talked about or even arrested on the 13th at all, I'm not sure how that got there. Danielle, I see your hand up, so maybe you know more about that.
I've always kind of theorized, like, you got to think February 11th in the early morning is when the wiretaps were put on Tony and Chris Carbert. And then it's like, then they had wiretaps on them when they did that. I've always just had a theory that was done while they were wiretapped because they were pretty sure that was what was going to get them really talking about hurting somebody about Tony. It or doing something about it. And they were going to get that defamatory sound bite out of them if they had gone ahead and did this. That's my theory personally.
So you agree with me then? They were provoking some sort of response from
100%.
And they were recording them.
And
Yeah, and the
because
only
they were wiretapped at the time when that all went down, so they were already on the monitor, they were already on the radar. And Tony went public. There's a video of him on TJ Kennedy's site. Like, they did an interview, and he's calm, cool, and collected. You know, this is what they did, and yeah, well, we're moving forward, and you know, that kind of thing. The reaction, yes, he was upset, but his emotions were in check, and it wasn't a reactive interview that he did in public, that's for sure. So they didn't get what they wanted out of them that night. They were really hoping somebody was going to say something stupid over that excavator issue, and that's where they were going to be able to arrest them. And it didn't happen until the next day, and they still hadn't gotten a soundbite. They still technically didn't have a reason to arrest them that night. We're still unsure as to what happened. I believe that's in the envelope. But
okay. And Donald, you're definitely a copper. We heard your ringtone. We heard your ringtone. Dun, 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 dun. You're a copper.
Just a blues.
Donald, you want to add
yeah.
anything here? You want to add anything here?
Sure. Look, I've been on many, many wiretaps. For a year when I was a copper, I was in a motorcycle accident, and they sent me downtown to work OPP headquarters, and that's all I did for over a year was wiretaps. So I know that you get some of your best conversation when something has happened, when there's an arrest being made, when a car is being towed, when there's just something that happened, and especially if one of the targets has been arrested or there's been a raid at that home, everybody gets talking, and boy, you can get some really good stuff. And in this case, you know, did anyone say, "Oh, someone's been arrested, let's hide the guns so they don't find them"? No, I think they went to sleep in the trailer.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we don't know, but yes, it is a fact. When things happen, people talk, and that may well have been, I won't rule that out, they may well have done that, hoping that people would talk. Now, was there some other reason to do it? Did someone mention, we're going to block the roads with that equipment? We brought it down here to block roads. Did anyone say that?
We don't have evidence of that, no.
No, we don't know. We simply don't know. So here we go. The answer is a simple yes. When the machines were disabled, then they would have expected to hear some talk.
So they were provoking.
Was that deliberate? I don't know.
Okay. And then also on the 12th, we heard about at least 2 semi-trucks being searched for guns. Their intelligence was telling them that there's thousands of ammunitions and hundreds of guns, so they're searching for it. They searched 2 semi-trucks, and my notes don't indicate they found any guns in any of those trucks. So on the 12th, this is before they arrested the men on the 13th, and then found some guns on the 14th. They're searching all over for guns. So their intelligence isn't very good because they're not finding what their intelligence is telling them, Donald. So this was coming out at this point.
Well, did somebody have a couple of beers and brag to the undercover female officers something that wasn't true? I mean, is that where that intelligence comes from? Let's hear the recording. Oh, wait, maybe there's no recording. You see, the whole thing is just so sloppy and lacks professionalism on a level that's just becoming so clear to me. So I really don't know what we're going to find, but I wish we would get to the evidence and get to the case, but it looks like it's going to be a year from now. These men should be released on bail with ankle bracelets, whatever. Oh yes, unless they intend to run out the clock.
That's right.
Which would be a way of avoiding the truth being exposed, that this whole thing was just created so that they could declare the Emergencies Act. I'm really getting a strong feeling based on the evidence I've seen so far.
Yep.
That may well be what we have here. We need some guns. We don't have 100 guns in the church or whatever. What do we got? What can you find for us? And they found these 4 Coutts Four.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe. But it rings true, doesn't it?
Yep. So my next note is February 13th, 7 a.m. They searched another semi-truck, found no guns. witness said correct. So at this point, February 13th, 7 in the morning, they still don't have any guns. Okay, remember, the 9th is when they're saying we have this information, there's a bunch of guns coming. The 11th, according to Danielle, wiretaps are being put in place on people. And by the 13th in the morning, they still have no guns, don't know where the guns are, and have no clue where this cache of thousands of ammunition and hundreds of guns is. They've looked at this church thing. They're now looking at semi trucks. So at this point, I believe, Donald, they're getting very desperate.
Well, let me say a word about that. They're getting desperate, but maybe they believe this.
I'm not saying they don't.
probably
I'm not
did.
saying that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not saying there's a plan, or I'm not saying there's a setup. I'm saying in their minds, they're searching and they're not finding it.
Yep.
Right. Okay. Now we got from the witness today. We were planning to talk to the owners of the trucking company to try and collapse, and because they were fatigued. So even on the 13th, their strategy was to try and get them to move and get the trucks out by talking to the owners of the company. It's very similar to a strategy in Ottawa. So threatening the owners of the trucking companies and the businesses. So in Coutts, this is how they were still talking about breaking it up. So again, no intimate danger, no intimate intelligence, nothing saying that this is a massive coup or anything that's about to start in Coutts. They're talking about, let's go and threaten the trucking companies and get them to move the trucks still. So, Donald, this is not indicators to me that there's some massive operation that they're aware of that they're preparing for, because they're still trying all the different things to clear this group. Am I maybe misanalyzing that particular piece of information?
Fog of war, maybe. We don't know what happened. We don't know what happened. The other thing is the community relations officers who were trying to, were trying to clear those trucks or negotiate with the owners or whatever. Maybe they had no idea of the undercover operation. Maybe they had no idea that the police were looking for thousands of weapons or hundreds or whatever it was. They're just doing their thing. So sometimes they're acting independently and nothing moves on it. It's just not relevant to the case that we're talking about that someone else did.
Okay. And now we got an 8 o'clock meeting with gold and silver, and they're talking about not finding guns and talking about who to arrest first. But then the next note is 11:31, so just before lunch. The defense asked this witness that you were provided with an emergency wire. Do you remember how you received that? So just before lunch, he received information that cache of guns, hundreds of guns, here's an emergency wire. And he was asked, where did you get that information? Like, how did it get to you? Once again, verbal. So somebody from the federal government on the ground in Coutts, standing beside this silver commander, telling him in his ear, we now have information, the guns are here somewhere. We got information on that. So this is right before they went and got their warrant, Donald. So this is the 13th.
You know
around
that could have been a lie. Think about it. Could have been. The politicians, now you say if someone from the federal government, are you saying a non-police officer told that to a police officer?
We don't know who it is.
Oh, I see. Okay. Fair enough.
But I think he mentioned justice. So he didn't say Department of Justice or Ministry of Justice or Minister of Justice. He didn't say that. He just said justice from Ottawa.
Right. Well, look, at the command level, there would be a team and they would have prosecutors, somebody from the Justice Department there to give legal advice on the crimes they were looking at, on how to proceed. That would have been there, and that's all well and good. But this was
intelligence, though. This was intelligence, so somebody was telling them intelligence. So CSIS,
right.
maybe someone else like that, because he was passing intelligence to him.
Well, didn't we hear from CSIS that they never heard anything about any threats or at the inquiry? Didn't we hear from CSIS that they never heard anything about threats?
Well, from CSIS, they're talking about reaching that level of the standard in Section 53 or whatever. But Danielle has something she might be able to add here.
No, and Donald's right. They did, like CSIS and Pat Morris, even of the OPP, when they're talking about intelligence across Canada, nothing's coming up. We don't have anything. I have those in my notes from the inquiry because I thought, well, geez, you'd think if there was this massive thing going on for days undercover in Coutts, that would have been passed up the line. especially since INSET was involved. National security was in Coutts. You'd think that that communication would have worked its way up the chain. But from what I understand, Jason, I believe that it was Tony that allegedly told one of the other covers that there's hundreds of guns and thousands of rounds of ammunition. But it was taken out of context too, from conversations that we've had. Like, got to think the undercover's acting like she's a real big gun enthusiast and a redneck and a real right winger. I'll use that term. But, they really put on this persona that they're, rural and they're hunters.
Of course.
And that's how they talk to them. And so I do believe that conversation was about, in general, like I say that here, even like out in the country here, I don't have any guns, but I know that there's hundreds of guns and hundreds of rounds of ammunition within 5 kilometers
all
of
around
me right now. 100% there is. So I believe that conversation was led to that. And I believe that it was taken out of context. I believe Tony was speaking of the terms like, yeah, everybody has guns in southern Alberta. We probably got hundreds of guns around us right now. And just in the context of our culture and nothing else. I do believe that that's where that started.
And unfortunately, that wasn't recorded. So we're not going to ever know really what was said there. All we have are the notes of someone after the fact. And that's what we're going to have to challenge if this does get to trial.
And once again, 4 sentences ago, what did Granny say? None of us right now can say four sentences ago or 5 minutes ago or 20 minutes ago, what were those exact words that Danielle said? Not one of us can do it. And yet these undercover officers, however many hours it was after that they made their notes, look what turned on that. An entire country taken by the emergency disaster.
Yeah, even Kanensky said it was impossible not to have somebody taking notes constantly. There was too much. Obviously, his job was a little more intense than an undercover, but the same concept applies. He said it was impossible. It would have been impossible to keep track of all of that. And if you know my friend Tony, I mean, some of us got to sit in the courtroom and watch his police interview. It was like 6 hours long. Like, you can't talk. Like, there's no way. Anybody that you guys have talked to, if you talk to him on the phone, there's no way after even 20 minutes on the jail phone, you're like, I can't remember what was said. And I mean, like, little clips and sound bites might pop into my head, but there's no way, especially with Tony. He's a big talker. He likes to talk.
Which is why the decision to not wear a recording device when they're so tiny and, there's no danger, not going to be found. The decision to not wear a recording device is a big red flag to me.
And I think you're giving him credit. I think there was one. I just think it's been hidden from us, honestly, Donald, because even if they even had a hint of one gun involved, they're going to wire them up for safety. So I have a real problem with that. But we're going to deal with what's in front of us.
Well, let me speak to this. Let me speak to the safety issue. Okay, they wouldn't have relied on a radio transmitter or anything like that for safety. My thoughts are there were maybe a dozen undercover officers always had these ladies in their sights. We don't know who they are because they're not witnesses, but absolutely, you think maybe that these 2 ladies were alone. They were not alone. Absolutely, there would have been a safety team there. But so once again, if you're going in undercover and you know the mission, then where are the recording devices?
Absolutely.
Where are
we got to let
recording?
Granny go. Yeah, we got to let Granny go. I just got a note here from Granny. So Granny, you want to go ahead and say goodbye? We got it from here if you want to go.
Internet's acting weird.
Yeah, you're back. You're back.
Okay, can you hear me? Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
I got things popping
and there's a
up.
scratch again.
Go figure. Okay, well, I gotta go. I got 2 grandsons upstairs that need hugs. So, ciao.
Thank you, Granny. We'll talk tomorrow.
Okay.
Bye. All right, so we're going to kind of wrap up as well here, guys. We're getting close to the end of the notes Friday, so we're almost done here. So at 15:45, which is 3:45 in the afternoon, the defense asked, there was a decision at this time to advance on the first security detail. Was that your decision? And the Silver commander said no. He doesn't recall who gave that decision. And again, this is one of those decisions that's not recorded. It's one of these verbal decisions that happened. So surprised at how little paperwork there is when it comes to the actual command structure and the decisions made here. But now this witness is saying someone made the decision to advance on the security details. This is at 3:45. So at this point, I believe this is when they went and got the warrant and worked on the warrant and got that warrant. So all these ITOs and all these discussions that are now being questioned today, this is when all of this stuff would have been happening and materializing, possibly even prepared ahead of time so that they were ready to go. But this is when the warrant got created, and then Chris L. was arrested. Now, a quote came out of the defense that I guess the Crown or the police provided about Chris, which is they said, he said, "These are sexy guns. I want to take one." Now, Danielle, there's an actual recording of this, so we don't even have to speculate on what he said. And my recollection of the recording was, those are sexy guns. I wish I had one. Something along those lines, more of a jealousy type of thing. But he certainly didn't say take one. I did not hear anywhere in that recording an indicator from him that he was going to acquire the gun from the police. What I heard from him was he wishes he could acquire a gun like that. So am I mishearing the recording? And is this allegation from the Crown or the police correct? What was your interpretation of that?
No, he definitely was just joking around. He was kind of laughing and joking around with them. I mean, previous to that, he was calling them donut eaters and doing all of that too. But there was a lot and a lot of them around, and I think that was just kind of that he was joking and he just, hey, you know, that's a sexy gun. He says, I sure wish I, or maybe he said something about I wish I had one, or I wish I could
That's
get
what
one.
I heard. I wish I had,
Yeah,
like
and
what I heard was jealousy about acquiring one.
It's very clear. Yeah.
Not to take one, which is what the allegation is.
No, not at all. And then it was kind of within, minutes after that. There was some time that went by, actually quite a bit of time that went by. It wasn't it's not like the officer he said that to turned around and arrested him. The officers ignored him that when he was talking like that. And it was probably 5 minutes later, a little while later, where they kind of started to swarm in on him a little bit more. It looks like maybe somebody kind of like identified him, maybe looked like they might have brought the police kind of and identified like who that was. So it wasn't like, the officer who heard that comment, it's not like he's like, oh, you're threatening me, and arrested him. That's not how that went at all. It was a bit of time passed, and then all of a sudden he was swarmed and then told that he was getting arrested for uttering threats. So some communication happened between that comment.
And that's what he testified to. So he actually testified to the communication. So the question was whether or not they approved the arrest of Chris Lysak at that point. And then he says, yes, correct, we approved it. So there was communication to Silver from Bronze, because these are the guys on the ground. So Bronze talked to Silver and said, look, he said he's going to take one of her guns. And they said, all right, arrest him, let's go. But he didn't say that. And there's actual recording of that. So that's not even debatable. He did not say take. He most certainly did not. And then they located Tony and arrested him on mischief. So they just straight up arrested him. I guess they decided to beforehand to get him. He didn't do anything at the time to be arrested. And again, that's on video. He was videoing, and he uploaded an interaction with the police where he was just watching them and wishing that they would, put their guns down and go, be peaceful as well as with them. And then they picked him up for mischief at that point. Did I miss anything about that arrest?
I don't believe so. No. But I do remember previous to that, there was a comment I think made. It would have been on the 13th, I believe. I don't have my notes right in front of me, but the silver and the gold, I believe, are talking. And there was a comment in the notes, something along the lines of, if an incident doesn't arise for arrest today, then we'll have to recoup tomorrow. So that would have been like after, like into February 14th. So there was something in the notes kind of pertaining to, like, it sounds like they were waiting for either somebody from the leadership or this security group to say or do something just a little bit off. I think Chris Lysick's comment was just enough, but there was comments made about if an incident doesn't arise to warrant arrest, like we're going to have to replan our strategy tomorrow. So
Right.
that was on the 13th as well. They were considering, oh, these
Yeah.
guys aren't really doing anything and we got to arrest them. So what's plan B? Right.
Yeah, and we saw that.
Show me the
we saw
man,
that-
I'll show you the crime.
Yeah.
Right. And we saw that, Danielle, the 12th, 13th, where they're searching for guns and not finding any either. So they're searching for firearms as well. And I'm not surprised to hear that maybe they were searching for people to say something. And
I
Donald,
do have
this
it in
is
my notes from that officer that throughout Coutts there were multiple searches and multiple guns found. I have it in my notes, so I'll maybe take a little bit of a peek at that. But I was always wondering, I'm like, with all the checkpoints around and everything the whole time, how many people did actually have guns? I mean, this is Southern Alberta, and you got to think people in the city might hear that, and that sounds like pretty, well, there's only one reason you need a gun. No, people around here just have them in their trucks and they're
Yeah.
safely stored. They travel with them. They're always there. My dad always had guns in the truck. Like, you borrow dad's truck, you got to know, oh, shoot, there's guns in there. You got to be cognitive. That's normal. So I always thought, like, how many people did just kind of show up and they were there and didn't think anything of it. They weren't going to be used. That's just where their gun lives.
Right.
And it is in my notes that he did say that there had been multiple people discovered with guns throughout the protest in itself. So why is one guy any more important than the other when it comes to that? Why weren't those conspiracy charges? Why weren't those weapons of a dangerous purpose? Right? When they were actually
you're not wrong.
with them on them, like in their vehicles, while they were in their vehicles. So
okay. So my notes don't have any of that. So those are going to be prior to Friday. So any of those comments that you made there was prior to Friday's testimony. So I can't comment on them. I can comment on the two semis that they spoke about here, didn't have any guns. And I can comment that Tony and Chris Lysick did not have any weapons or firearms on them when they were arrested either. So they weren't with any firearms in the Coutts. So I can say that. Danielle's probably right, because Danielle's right about a lot of things. That previous testimony may have brought that up, but I didn't have that in my notes. So maybe we'll do a recap another time on other stuff that happened prior to this week. But right now, I don't have any notes on that.
Just on the guns routine.
Yep.
People who live in Cochrane or North Bay or Thunder Bay or Elliott Lake or whatever.
It's a necessity there. You have to have them.
There's bears in your backyard.
Yeah.
People have cages in their backyard so that their children can play safely. And people just don't get that. That's what it is up here. And everybody's got bear spray. Everybody's got a gun. I don't, but you get my point.
Yeah.
There are reasons that city people just don't understand, but they're valid, and everybody has a gun up north.
Right. Absolutely. And there's nothing wrong with it, guys. These are not, I'm going to stop saying weapons at all times. These are firearms. Okay. Firearms are not necessarily weapons at all. They're tools, and in the right hands, they're good tools. And then the defense also asked when they were arresting Chris. So now we're at the arrest on February 14th, the early morning. The defense asked whether or not the RCMP received legal advice to move on and to seize anything, like to move into the residence and seize anything. Now, Donald, something very early in our coverage you brought up was whether or not these were classified as residents. That came out on Friday. Yes. So they considered the main trailer and then the two trailers residents, because they called them R1, R2, R3 for resident 1, 2, and 3. And this is how they classified it during their strategy conversations. So answer your question, the warrant definitely should have been covering it properly, and I don't think it did in the end.
Well, that's the thing. It's one thing to stand there, but did they tell the judge, or was the warrant just for trailers? I don't know.
You're starting to get into the publication ban information.
I'm just asking.
You don't know.
You don't know.
That's why I can't answer your question. So I can't answer that question because that is under the ITO stuff, and that's going to be coming out, I think, in due time. But you're very good for your suspicions on that. I can hint you at that one. And then there were any discussions about bugging the lawyer room at the RCMP station. So this is a rumor that came out. I think we've heard this a few times.
Wow.
Well, hold on. Let's get to the answer, though. So
Okay.
there was a rumor in the question on whether or not they planned to bug the lawyer room at the RCMP station. At first, he said no, because they gave him the wrong station name. So that would have been a correct answer for him, because the defense actually named the wrong RCMP station. And then they actually came back after a break to re-clarify that, because they had to say the correct one to get the answer to be answered. But in both cases, he denied that the lawyer rooms were going to be bugged in any way, shape, or form. Now, that's on the record now, Donald. So if we find out later that sure enough there was conversation, he's
I'd be
impeached on this
I'd
one.
be surprised if they, because you do that, you lose your whole case. I'd be very surprised if anyone was stupid enough to do that, foolish enough to do that. But
Yep. But he put on the record, no, they did not do that. Danielle, you've heard this rumor before that maybe there was a bug in the lawyer's room?
That had been brought up in June, that there was there wasn't an actual bug put in the lawyer's room. There was an application started to make to get a wiretap in that room. So yeah, and then the
Okay.
witness on Friday didn't seem to really know anything about that. He was being questioned, and he went
Not
for
to
the
the best of his
defense,
knowledge,
like
he
the
doesn't know,
defense
he
did
said.
that. He's
Yeah.
like, what? And he even paused and stopped and looked and went, you mean the defense did that? And they said, no, that's not the defense. That was the start of a wiretap application that, I mean, another witness, yeah, had kind of talked about, and yeah, that wasn't, I'm not so sure about that one, Jason. We'll have to check on the publication ban on that,
Yeah.
because I do believe that witness is under a publication ban, the other one. So we'll have to check on that one a little bit more, if we can talk about that or
Sure.
not. But
But
it
on the
was brought
on the
up
record,
with
he
this
said no.
witness, which I don't believe this witness on Friday has a publication ban. So
No,
we
he
can
doesn't.
speak on the fact that he wasn't aware of that, that was a thing. But I did,
Yeah.
yeah, his physical reaction to that question was pretty telling. He had to ask for clarity. You know, it didn't sound like a normal thing to be doing.
Yeah, no, he denied it. So if
Yeah.
there was something that was going on, he didn't know about it or forgot or whatever. But yeah, he said no bug as far as he's aware. And like you said, it sounds like he didn't even know about the application too. Let me now go look at some. We're coming to the end of this one. This guy. Oh, the decision around arresting the leadership. So Marco, Alex, George, and who's the fourth one? Peter, or who's the fourth one? Alex, Marco, George. It might be Peter. It almost sounds like a joke we're setting up. But anyways, the decision was not to arrest him at this point, and he doesn't know who made that call. It came from above, not to arrest the leadership. Who was involved? Yeah, a lot of denials at this point, and no record of who was given orders. And then we started talking about whether or not all his documents were given to the. So I guess at the end of Friday, we got back to the whole missing document question, and they're going to be looking through the documents some more. And then they were asked if they were given a permission from the Crown to use force. So any use of force reports provided and authorized. So Donald, you will know what this is. So the Crown can say, hey, here's a arrest package. Use of force is allowed. Go ahead and get people. There were none of these in this case. Is that normal?
okay, it all boils down to the individual officer's judgment at the time. Now, there's such a thing as a no-knock warrant. And the no-knock warrant means we go in swiftly with great ready-to-use force, kick down the door, and in we go. And usually these days, if you're talking about a residence and you want to go in without alerting the people, you have to tell that to the judge, and that would appear. And the judge there'll sometimes be something in there about, may use all reasonable force as is reasonably necessary or whatever. But in the end, it's the man or woman holding the police officer, holding the weapon, who decides at the time. And there's nobody on earth can control can control that. Nobody's allowed to say, oh, you can't go in with, you have to go in without a weapon or something. Police would refuse. So that's what that's all about. Did they really think, when they went into these premises, did they really think that there were going to be people there coming out shooting at them? I don't know. Sometimes they just use a show of overwhelming force because that keeps people in their place. And
I can answer that
very
question.
well.
Yeah, that did
Go
come
ahead.
up. They did expect a shootout like the OK Corral. They went to level 4 body armor, which is a full shield and everything like that.
Right.
They did do a surround, and they did the whole call out, come out with your hands up stuff. So he did talk about how that was the strategic takedown for this particular arrest. So yeah, they were going in there, guns drawn, ready for a shootout.
Sure.
He was sleeping.
But that
He was
can
sleeping.
be theater too, can't it?
For sure.
That can be
for
theater.
sure.
Yes.
Right. You show that to a judge on how prepared they were to take down these guys, and boy, do they look like very dangerous people. So now we're getting to the end here, Danielle. So thank you very much for sticking around for a little bit. We're almost done. Some of the more important things that came out at the end of this part was he was asked whether or not, well, actually, the witness was kind of complaining about the scribes at this point. And he's the one that highlighted that they don't have any training. He said, the witness said, I don't even know if they even had training. It is an area we need to work on when it comes to scribes and their abilities to scribe. So it sounds like they were just randomly grabbing some people to become scribes at some point. And even he felt that was something that needs to be improved going forward. So now when we're dealing with scribe notes not matching, and we're dealing with scribes not capturing at all. And then the next part here, Donald, is he actually told us that at least 2 meetings between gold and silver, the scribes were asked to leave so they can go ahead and have it off the record, continue that meeting off the record. So we know that on February 10th, there was at least 2 meetings that the scribes were asked to leave, and on the 13th. So on the 10th, at least one.
What would be a
13th,
reasonable excuse or a reason, a legitimate reason for asking scribes to leave?
I got that. That's coming up
in that
next.
meeting.
Yep, that's in my next
my
notes.
question.
Yeah, good question, because the defense did the same question.
Well, and then on that note too, I think like the Crown tried to argue that, because these scribe notes are important to this case, and he's trying to argue. He made the comment, well, these are just notes. They're not meant to be
accurate.
They're not meant to be anything to look at. But yeah, we've heard it in court before where this officer that was there on Friday was asked, do you understand the importance of note-taking during an investigation? Yes. Do you understand that it's important for court proceedings? Yes. So it is being used constantly. It's actually being used to justify their emergency wiretap, and all the arrest all goes off of undercover officer notes. And now we're talking about scribe notes. So this guy isn't even trying to do it as he's going. He's got a hired hand. And the Crown is still desperately trying to discredit these notes all of a sudden. All of a sudden, they don't mean nothing. That's not meant for nothing. That's just meant for memory, right?
Yeah, and that was on Tuesday.
It was desperate, but
yeah, that comment came out on Tuesday, and that was in reference to the sealed envelope, because I believe the scribe-based notes that are those 4 lines that we keep talking about.
Exactly.
Yeah. And he was trying to diffuse that as a part of his argument, saying, well, it doesn't even matter what they say. They're not supposed to be accurate. And the whole crowd goes, what? So you can see how the Crown was trying to diffuse the information in that envelope by making that comment. And then later on, we're relying upon scribe notes to prosecute these people, having your cake and eating it too, their Crown. But anyways, at this point, what we were doing was we're coming to the reason why the scribes were removed. So the defense asked, how many meetings were scribes asked to leave? The witness says, the 1 meeting for sure, referring to the 10th, because we were talking about the 10th at this point, and the one on the 13th. So at least 2 days where scribes were asked to leave. And I want to say at least, because he did allude to, it could have been more, but I do remember at least 2 times that they had to leave or were asked to leave. And the defense asked, the reason to ask the scribes to leave, was this for privacy? Answer, yes. So now, Donald, during an investigation, who has privacy that requires to be off the record like this?
All right. Let's say you didn't really trust some of the people you're working with. Let's say that maybe the senior officers didn't trust these scribes. And now they're
For
going
like
to
leaking
talk about
purposes?
Say again?
Worried about leaks from the scribes, that kind of thing?
Sure, could be. Okay. And, don't forget, during the whole hysteria over the convoy, police forces wiretapped their own people
Right.
all across Canada. We know that. So there was this hysteria. So is that a reason? But they wouldn't be in there with senior people if they weren't trusted. I mean, let's face it. They would not be if they're there for all that time during all the discussions and everything. And now we want you to leave. Is it because they're saying what some politician said? Look, they tell us in Ottawa that we really have to get moving here, or whatever they said.
I guess
Why
we won't
was it?
know.
I want to know.
Yeah, we may not know. We may never know that answer. Now we're wrapping up here, Danielle. There's the last little part here where they're talking about working with federal. So there's somebody by the name of Sora Rupa. Sora Rupa is my note here. I don't know who that is. I don't know if I got the name right, but this is somebody in Ottawa who was participating in these meetings at this point. I don't know if they're judicial. I don't know if they're police. I don't know who they are, but Sora Rupa. Yeah, INSET. So what was INSET again? That was RCMP?
Yeah, it's a division of the federal branch of the RCMP. It's national security. So internal national security side. I have the acronyms from June when we went over them, but yeah, they were in there.
That came up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so some of those last meetings actually, like that name had never, we never heard that name come up in June. Not at all. That's Sorba or whatever his name is.
Sora Rupa. It could be she, Sora Rupa.
So that was the first time we had ever heard about communications with INSET or Rupa from the federal government. That was the first time on Friday that's even popped up. So,
and that's where we ended. So my notes end there. So that's at 4:13 now. We've adjourned to November 1st, and then we went home.
Yeah, and I just want to touch back on that. What is it? Call and contain. The call and contain order at this when they did the trailers. The judge's reaction to that. Sorry?
When they took down Chris?
Yeah, what was it called? The warrant had a hold and contain order on it. What was the words? So this is where they block the house down and they stand outside with the guns and they force them to come out. And that's not a normal practice, it doesn't sound like. And the judge had to ask for a lot of clarity on that. He said, like, so as you would do with an armed somebody who's heavily armed inside of a house, like you would react that way, assuming that you're about to get shot. So yeah, when the people that were actually in the trailers and in that house were arrested, it was quite the scene. They were trying to get some information from the officers. The officers wouldn't come in the house. They were trying to force them out of the house. And people were really, really scared when that happened. So even the judge had to ask for clarity. Like, by this, you mean like call and contain? Like, this is what we do with people who are like a hostage situation almost, right?
I think he used that word too,
right? Hostage. He did. Yeah. He made it very clear that this isn't something. And he says, well, why did you do that? And he says, well, we thought there was hundreds of guns in there. They're still going with that narrative right up until the last minute. Oh, we thought there was hundreds of guns. Well, there's a 60-year-old woman, a 22-year-old girl, and a man. Like, that's all that was in the house. So I don't care if there was 100 guns. The accusations weren't about the people that were in that house that were treated like that. It was very, very traumatizing for them. I know that. A lot of PTSD from that. And they were, one of them was roughed up. You can hear it in the apparently, like, she was slammed onto the cop car and the car alarm, or no, maybe her car, and the car alarm goes off. So it was pretty scary for those people. So that order being made was above and beyond anything that was necessary, given that they didn't have any actual evidence of guns in the first place that those orders were made. But the judge seemed a little surprised by that call even.
Absolutely. And you're right. You're right. And even we just saw Jacqueline's note in the chat that said a no-knock warrant for data and documents is unheard of. And what we also didn't cover in this episode is Jacqueline's story. So go back to Jacqueline's story, which was Wednesday. It's 3.5 hours long. Watch it, folks, because this is a hell within the hell. This is a story within the story. And what they did to her, too, will let you know what these guys are up to. And Jacqueline made a great point here, Donald, and she's not trying to get herself in trouble. But she and Jerry, because she knows him as her husband, she was with him the entire time of all the times that he went to Coutts. So she was with him along all of the times he had interactions with Coutts, and it was her vehicle. Yet he's in jail and she's not. So if there was a massive conspiracy, she was even questioning why she's not in jail, because she was physically with him the entire time. So she would have had to have been a co-conspirator if there was such a thing. So that she highlighted very well in her video the hypocrisy of what's going on and exactly what these charges look like. It should have been going to everybody if they're real, but they're not real. So she was highlighting the fact that like she's not in jail right now. She's charged with some things, but she's not being held like they were. Did you watch that episode yet, Donald?
I watched a bit of it, yes, and it really was very moving. But I want to know from the RCMP media scrum on the 14th when they showed all those weapons and all the rest of that. What I really want to know is where are all these other co-conspirators that they spoke of? This national organization with a leadership that was directing the events and the terrorism at Coutts. Where is it? Where? Oh, they don't exist. It was all theater.
Absolutely. And yeah, we're about to wrap up. Donald's got to go. Danielle's got to go. I got to go. Hannah's got to go in the chat there. So everybody's got to go. But thank you all very much. This was a good episode. So unless there's anything else, Danielle or Donald, that you want to add before I wrap up, I think we've done a good summary here for the entire week.
Nope, that's it. That's I got lots to say, but we gotta go. So,
yeah. You take care, Danielle. Thank you so much. And Donald, is the last comment you want to make before I drop you?
The more I hear, the more I see, I'm very optimistic. The Crown's case is built on a house of cards.
Yeah, flimsy house of cards too. Flimsy house of cards. But thank you all both. Thank you both, and thank you, Granny. You had to run. You get some hugs out. They're valuable hugs, so I understand, Granny. Take care, Donald. Take care, Danielle. We'll talk to you guys later. Well, folks, we couldn't do it in an hour. We had to condense an entire week worth of court into almost 3 hours. But now we have a recording, a video, a stream that basically covers every single thing that happened that week. Hopefully that was a good summary for you all. And hopefully we answered some questions, possibly brought up some questions, and we're definitely going to have you on the seat of your chair until we get back in November or sooner. I'm definitely going to move forward with some sort of application to fix this whole media problem that we have. I'm going to use the publication ban that shouldn't have been put in place as the grounds for that application. And I might be successful even having that particular media ban overturned and the temporary media ban or publication ban removed. Because what they've done at this point is they've made a truth ban, and they've actually created the conditions that will make sure the jury is confused with fake, mis, dis, and malinformation. So I'm going to go ahead and talk to somebody about putting the application in. I don't have to do it with the defense. This can be for me, because I want to be media. So I can be a party. I will have standing, and it would be a valid application. Whether or not I'll be successful is another question. But those are the kind of things we're going to do. So make sure you all subscribe. Give me some of those likes. Do all that kind of stuff. It really helps. We're pushing a lot. And let me just go look at the numbers. Because for an early morning show, yeah, we're at least 400 live concurrent right now watching. So all of you, give me a like, give me a subscribe, tell a friend, share. You can find us on Rumble, Odyssey, Twitch, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Getter. On all the platforms, we're going to get this out there, but for sure, Facebook is going great. Everything's going great. So keep sharing and keep subscribing and keep liking and keep following. If you like it, clip it. Please do. The number one complaint I get from people is we don't clip the show from our side. Folks, one man trying to get this done. The best I can do is get you the full video. If you guys can help me out and clip it, please do. Whenever you guys do that, it blows up because you're finding the good piece of information that triggered you. So share it with other people. So please, by all means, do that. You can also join our Discord server where we collaborate sometimes and we bring information out there first. We talk about it and then we go bring it public. So if you want to get ahead of the game, go join our Discord server and you'll see information as we're discussing it. And Twitter is another great place to go ahead and do that. There's a lot of conversations happen on Twitter. A lot of conversations happen on Twitter. So also make sure you make some comments. That helps the algorithm as well. And I do, this is my commitment to you, I do read them all and I do respond in some way, whether you get a thumbs up or an answer to your question. I do respond. That particular thing has gone from minutes in my day to hours in my day. So yet another reason why I can't get clips is because I am responding to all comments and reading all comments. This was a big episode. Thank you all very much. I hope it helped you get an understanding of what happened that week. And if I missed any information, put it in the comments and we'll respond to it. And thank you all very much for being here today. I really appreciate it. And as always, I love you guys very much. And God bless.